So welcome everyone. Yeah. Oh, give me one moment.
אשת חיל ממצא ורחוק מפנינים בטח בלב בעלה ושלל לא יחסה.
All right, sorry about that. Oh, right, that's what I was going to do. Sorry, I had a bit of echo. So yeah, I've been really busy lately because it was the end of the semester, but now that that's over, I'm able to stream again. But unfortunately, because it's been 2 weeks, Avi's at the gym. Otherwise, I think he'd join. But and then Graham is spending time with family, so that's good. So I'm just going to do this by myself unless anyone else joins, which is fine. Probably make it go faster. But on that note, is there anything else? All right, that yeah, so we're going to do 2 of them tonight, and by that I mean we're just going to listen to 2 of them. And again, it's just going to be me, so I'm going to interject if I find something particularly interesting. But yeah, I mean, more than anything, it's just going to be watching or rather listening to it. In the meantime, let's start off with some context as to Metzora. Let's see. One moment. Also, I finally ended up getting YouTube Premium on this account, which I hadn't had it just because they had a better deal because I like grandfathered in from before they jacked up the prices. But since they changed that and it was going to be the same no matter what, I actually ended up getting a free month of YouTube Premium on this account because I hadn't had it before. So here, I need to share my screen. Here. Let's see. Also, if anyone gets the reference of this, what is it? The reference of this episode, kudos to you. So, let's see. What was I looking for? All right. Metzora. Let's see. Oh, I know. Here. Parshah X2.
Hi, I'm 𝐤𐇇𝐓, and welcome to the Creative Judaism channel.
Let's see. Here.
Hi, I'm 𝐤𝐇𝐓, and welcome to the Parsha Rabbit Hole, where I find something weird in the weekly Torah portion and follow it all the way down until it gets even weirder. This week's rabbit hole eventually gets us to garlic breath and the purpose of earlobes.
The ears have it. The classic game of whose ears you have, which ears have it, and whether you have those ears.
But as always, we have to get there. This week's rabbit hole is dedicated in honor of Lulu, who loves the Parsha Rabbit Hole. Thank you so much for watching, Lulu. It means so much to me that I get to share all of this cool stuff with you and with everyone else who watches the Parsha Rabbit Hole. And speaking of all the people who watch the Parsha Rabbit Hole, that leads me to Mrs. Mika Sofer, who happens to be the person who sponsored this dedication in honor of Lulu, but who also happens to be the publisher and editor of COLLive.com. And it's thanks to her and to COL Live that a lot of you found your way here and that now I get to share all this cool stuff with you. So thank you so much for that. All right, let's get started. This week's Torah portion, Parshas Metzora, continues teaching us about tzaraat, which is a disease that's mentioned in the Torah that can present on a person's skin or on clothes or on the walls of a house. According to Rambam, these are actually three different things that are all called by the same name. But he says that they all have the same spiritual cause, which is lashon hara, saying bad stuff about other people.
Borrowing a blanket from a sick camel in Turkey can cause a disease, but I really don't see how telling people that you shower with swim trunks on can cause a disease. Well, great! Now even more people know!
This idea that tzaraat is caused by lashon hara is pretty accepted across the board by all the different commentaries. But it's not weird enough for me. Yeah, sure, ancient supernatural disease caused by bullying is interesting, but I've heard it a gazillion times and I wanted to focus on something weirder. Also, I'm just personally not all that excited about the topic of lashon hara. I get that it's important, but it's not my thing. Fortunately for me, when the Torah talks about the sacrifice that a person offers after they heal from tzaraat, there's some weird details in the ritual. It says that the kohen should take the blood from the sacrifice and dab some of it on the person's right ear and on their right thumb and on their right big toe.
An army without leaders is like a foot without a big toe.
So right ear and on their right thumb and on their right big toe.
An army without leaders is like a foot without a big toe.
So ear, thumb, big toe felt like a trail worth following to me, and it seemed a lot weirder than the lashon hara thing. But the trail kept on leading me back to lashon hara. I tried to avoid it, but there was no escape. It just kept on sneaking up on me. So this rabbit hole starts with a strange ritual involving ears and thumbs and toes and leads me back to harmful speech. If you're ready to see how I got there, let's dive in. Okay, so first of all, it's worth mentioning that this ear, thumb, big toe thing happens in one other context, which is when Aaron and his sons were inducted as kohanim to be the ones to do all the sacrifice stuff in the temple. So that's kind of weird too. The only people who have this ritual done to them are the super holy sacrifice guys and then the guys who got a skin disease by gossiping. Seems like a strange pairing, and I'll get into an explanation of that later. But the thing that jumped out at me first is the word for the part of the ear that the blood is put on. In the verse it says tenuch oizen, the tenuch of the ear. In modern Hebrew, the word tenuch means earlobe. But if you look in translations, most of them translate it as the inner ridge of the ear. That's how Rashi translates it. But Rashi also says that he doesn't know where this word comes from or any other related words. Just that that's how it's translated by people who know how to translate things. Okay, so what's the inner ridge of the ear? The official name for it is the antihelix, which is that hard cartilagey thing, not the outer one, but the inner one. And most commentaries agree with this interpretation. But Ibn Ezra seems to disagree. He says, in the name of Sadja Gaon, that the tenuch is the soft part that's connected to the circle of the ear. which sounds like an earlobe to me.
Okay, my deal. Boston rules. 2 up, 1 down. Elf ears are wild. Joker ears are regular ears. Ears go cold once they're off the head. Rat ears are an automatic loss. No peeking, sniffing, or grunting, and no asking, do I have lobes?
But it seems like he's in the minority. It seems like most everybody else says it's the antihelix. And since antihelix is the standard interpretation of that word, I'm curious why tanuch was chosen to mean earlobe in modern Hebrew. Also, interestingly, it seems like there isn't any actual word in modern Hebrew for antihelix. It just gets transliterated into Hebrew characters. A friend pointed out to me that older Yiddish translations also seem to lean towards earlobe, so perhaps that was an influence. If anybody knows more about the etymology on this, please put it in the comments. So the ear thing is what originally got my attention, but there are also fingers and toes involved in this ritual. Rabbeinu Bachya says that these 3 body parts, the ear, the thumb, and the big toe, represent 3 general abilities of the body, and that they correspond to different spiritual and physical realms of the universe. So that altogether, this ritual represents a healing of the entire human and the entire world. But then he starts talking about fingers, and that's the part that I was really fascinated by. He says that according to experts of the natural world, each of the 5 fingers have a different purpose, which corresponds to one of the 5 senses. The thumb is for cleaning out your mouth, which corresponds to the sense of taste. The index finger is for cleaning out your nose, which corresponds to the sense of smell. The middle finger corresponds to the sense of touch, because why it's the longest. I saw someone online translate that as scratching, that the middle finger is used for scratching all the different parts of your body, and that maybe made a little bit more sense to me. Anyways, let's continue. The 4th finger is for cleaning your eyes, which would correspond to the sense of sight. And the 5th finger, the pinky, is used for cleaning out the ear, which corresponds to the sense of hearing. Then he concludes by saying that this illustrates how perfect God's creation is, that we were given 5 senses and a servant for each one, and each finger seems to do its job automatically without us even having to think about it. Okay, so I just thought that this was really cool. Maybe kind of gross, but also really cool. Now, I personally don't do the pinky ear thing, but I've seen people do it, and I think it's gross.
Get that finger out of your ear. You don't know where that finger's been.
But apparently, that's the whole purpose of the pinky finger, so I guess go ahead. Also, Rabbeinu Bachya says this in the name of nature experts or scientists. So I tried to dig around for non-Jewish sources that expanded on this, but I couldn't find anything. If any of you have any more info on this, please let us all know in the comments. On the topic of the purpose of fingers, there's a Gemara that I stumbled across a couple months ago about fingers and ears that never made it into the rabbit hole that I was researching for at the time, but I think it's a good fit here. It asks, why are fingers shaped like pegs? And then it answers that it's so if a person hears something they shouldn't be listening to, they can stick their fingers in their ears. The Gemara then offers a similar teaching from the Mishnaic era, which asks why the entire ear is hard, but the earlobe is soft. And the answer that it's so that if a person hears something inappropriate, they can bend their earlobes up into their ears. Then the Gemara gives us another ear-related fun fact that says that a person should always be careful not to hear meaningless speech because the ears are the first to be burned. Okay, so a few things to unpack there. First of all, it took me back to Lashon Hara, but I think we can afford to ignore that for now because there's some cool ear stuff that we can focus on. All right, now let's talk about the ear burning thing. I thought that there would be a lot more commentary on this, and there wasn't. I saw one place that said that it was talking about Gehenna, that in the afterlife, that's the first part of the body to feel the effects of the punishment. But according to Rashi, it seems like it's talking about a natural phenomenon, that ears burn first. I tried Googling a little bit, but I just got a bunch of stuff about the expression, my ears are burning, when someone's talking about you. And so I thought maybe there's a connection to this idea of ears actually burning, but I couldn't find any connection. And I didn't really want to dig very much deeper because I felt like it might get disturbing. But while I was digging around for stuff about the ear, thumb, big toe ritual, I stumbled across a mention of this ear burning thing in Shem Mishmul, which is a Hasidic work from the early 20th century. He's explaining this ritual of putting blood on the ear, thumb, and big toe as being connected to the idea that a Jew is supposed to be a panini, not to be confused with a panini, which is a word that doesn't have a good direct translation in English. It literally means an internal person, I guess, but that doesn't really make any sense. I asked some friends for ideas for translations, and some suggestions were integrity and authenticity, basically the opposite of superficial. Anyways, he says that a Jewish person is supposed to be a panimi, and that the kohanim who do the temple stuff should exemplify this quality the most. And then he explains the ear, thumb, toe thing in that context. He says that the limbs of the body, the arms and the legs, protrude from the body. They stick out, and that ears also stick out. And then he mentions that Gemara about ears burning first and says that that's why they burn first, because they stick out. And then he adds another idea, that your limbs can move because the soul, even though it's inside your body, has the power to reach these limbs and make them move. But the ears don't move. Why? Because they're too far out, and the soul's power and ability to move things can't reach them. So these two ideas illustrate how external the ears are. So when Aaron and his sons became kohanim, who are supposed to be the most internal people, for lack of a better word, part of the ritual was to specifically sanctify the most external parts of the body. He focuses on the ear here and doesn't mention specifically the thumb and the big toe, but I assume that it's the same reasoning because they're the outermost points of the body. Later on, he connects this to the Metzora, the disease guy, as well, and points out that the Metzora has to be quarantined outside of the camp, away from everyone else, which illustrates how, through saying bad stuff, they made themselves the opposite of a panimi, an inward person, to the extent that they are physically moved outside of the community. So when they're all better and ready to become a panimi again, they also have to do the ear, thumb, toe thing. Okay, so first of all, we're back to Lashon Hara.
That's Lashon Hara.
But again, I'm going to try to ignore it. There are other cool ideas to explore here. Mainly, I just liked how it brought everything together, but I have a couple of questions. First of all, the burning thing and the moving thing don't apply to the thumb and the toe, so how do they fit into the ritual? Also, ears stick out, but they don't stick out that much. I mean, my ears stick out more than most people's, but even so, they're not sticking out as far as my thumbs and big toes. So the answer that I made up to this question is that these two questions answer each other. The thumb and the toe are just very obviously the most external points of the body, so we don't really need any extra proof for why they're part of the ritual. But the ears aren't as obvious, so he gives those two illustrations. If you've got a better answer, put it in the comments. Okay, so during the course of this whole explanation, Shem Shmuel mentions the Maharal of Prague a couple of times. And one of those times he refers to an explanation of the Maharal about a delator, which is a word that I wasn't familiar with. So I followed that word to the Maharal, and from there to a Midrash, and eventually to a Gemara, where I looked in Rashi and found out that this word had led me straight back to Lashon Hara. Delator means a talebearer. It's actually a Latin word for an informer, someone who rats out someone else. And the Gemara that this word led me to has a chain of stories about people who didn't tell on somebody else. And the Gemara keeps asking after each story, who did he learn that from?
You learn the two greatest things in life.
Well,
Look at me. Never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut.
And then they tell another story. And then who did he learn that from? Until eventually it gets back to God. But one of the earlier stories in this chain was particularly interesting to me, and it got me hooked. And so it was at this point that I decided to give up, give in, and pursue the whole Lashon Hara thing, at least in the context of this story. This is what it says. Rabbi Yehuda was sitting and teaching, and he smelled garlic. And he said, whoever is eating garlic should leave. Rabbi Chia stood up, and he left, and then everybody else stood up and left. So basically, instead of ratting out the garlic guy, or even just waiting for him to own up to it himself, Rabbi Chia was going to take the fall for him, and then everybody else joined in, sparing the real garlic guy from humiliation.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
So for us living in the 21st century, this idea of everyone standing up and taking the blame is something that just exists in our collective consciousness. It's a trope. But it seems like when this story happened, it exists in our collective consciousness. It's a trope. But it seems like when this story happened, it was a pretty new idea. New enough, at least, that apparently people didn't quite know how it worked yet. The Gemara continues the story and says that the next day, Rabbi Yehuda's son, Rabbi Shimon, confronted Rabbi Chia and said, hey, you disturbed my father. And Rabbi Chia said, no, there should not be such behavior among the Jewish people. So Rashi fills in the blanks a little bit, as usual, and spells it out. That Rabbi Shimon thought that Rabbi Chia was actually the garlic guy. He didn't know the Spartacus trope yet. And so Rabbi Chia answered, God forbid I should be the garlic guy. No Jew should ever do such a thing. Basically explaining to Rabbi Shimon that the only reason why he got up and left was to spare the real garlic guy from being humiliated by being forced to publicly admit to the heinous act of munching on garlic in the middle of class. So I really like this story for a bunch of reasons. First of all, I like that there's a Talmudic origin for this concept. But mostly, I love the idea of how awful it was that this guy was eating garlic, and the imagery of how humiliating it would be for somebody to have to publicly admit to eating garlic. And by the way, even Rabbi Chia, who covered for the guy, was also judgmental of it. It's not like he didn't think it was a big deal. God forbid such a behavior should exist among Jews, right? That's what he said. So he also thought that this was like a really bad thing to do, to eat garlic in the middle of
Has he
class.
never had garlic? I mean, has he never had
garlic eating degenerate? So that's fun for me. But the Maharsha has a question about this story. He asks, how could Rabbi Shimon have thought that Rabbi Chia was the garlic guy? Everybody else got up and followed him out. So obviously everybody else understood how this bit works. If everybody takes the blame, then nobody has to take the blame. So how could Rabbi Shimon be the only one who didn't pick up on how this works? The Maharsha has an answer to this question that I really like, but first I want to hop over to the Ben Ish Chai, who offers his own answer to this question. He says that Rabbi Shimon thought that Rabbi Chia was actually the garlic guy, but then everybody else left too out of respect for him. In other words, Rabbi Shimon didn't realize that the whole point of the bit was to stop anybody from being exposed as the garlic guy.
The fire guy. Yeah, the fire guy.
He just thought that everybody was being supportive of Rabbi Chia and standing in solidarity with him, even though he had admitted to being the garlic guy. And then the story plays out the way Rashi said, that Rabbi Chia said, God forbid I should be the garlic guy. I was just trying to cover for the actual garlic guy. But the Maharsha's answer to this question flips the entire second part of the story around completely. He says that when Rabbi Shimon said, you disturbed my father, he wasn't misunderstanding the bit. He got it. He knew that Rabbi Chia was covering for the guy. What he meant was, you disturbed my father by making everybody leave and causing bittul Torah, making people stop learning Torah. Really, just the garlic guy should have gotten up and left, and everybody else should have stayed there and continued learning. So then Rabbi Chia responds, yeah, bittul Torah, causing people not to learn Torah is a big deal and a bad thing. But allowing someone to be humiliated is even worse. And that's what he meant by God forbid such a behavior should exist among Jews. Not the garlic eating, but embarrassing people, or even passively allowing somebody to be embarrassed. Okay, so there are a couple things that I love about this. First of all, I love it when there can be two completely different ways of reading the same thing that both make perfect sense. When you read that Gemara like Rashi, it feels obvious. Like, yeah, that's what the Gemara is saying. There's no other way to read it. But then the Maharshal pokes a little hole. And then when you read it his way, that makes complete sense and feels like the obvious way to read it. So that's very fun to me. I also really like how the Maharshal takes that last thing from Rabbi Chia and turns it around so that he's not defending himself at the expense of the garlic guy. He's explaining why it's so important to protect the garlic guy. But what I love most about this is that I feel like this story presents a very different way of looking at Lashon Hara than the one that I was running away from. As a person who struggles with embracing authority, discussions of Lashon Hara can often contain a little too many don'ts for my liking. But this story presents a side of it that feels more like an opportunity. It's not just about what I shouldn't say so that I don't hurt somebody, but how to look at any situation I'm in and figure out what I can say or do that might help somebody or spare somebody from being hurt. All right, that's it. That's the rabbit hole. As always, if you have any questions or insights or something about this topic that you want to share, let us know in the comments. Thank you for following me down the rabbit hole, because now nobody will know which one of us dug it.
لقاء من روح وكل لقاء بستفيد شيء جديد. بتعلم بالدورة كيف أكون بني آدم مسؤول، كيف أكون بني آدم قيادة، بني آدم صبور، أكون مرشد عشان نبني جيل قيادي صالح.
شبيبة عتيدنا هي أكثر من برنامج وهي أكثر من إطار. شبيبة عتيدنا هي مشروع بناء مجتمع، مشروع بناء مجتمع من خلال بناء جيل يتمتع بالمهارات الاجتماعية، بالمهارات الشخصية، بالمهارات البين شخصية.
إحنا كحركة شبيبة بنشتغل على شخصية الأولاد وتقوية الثقة بنفسهم.
أنا فتت بكورس المدارسين وكان في مخيم أكيد 7 أيام اللي إحنا بنرشد فيه أو إنه بطريق إني أتعلم كيف أرشد.
مثلا سوينا فرق بين كل البلدات، بين كل بلدات كل واحد طب مع الثاني، فعاليات حلوة مع بعض.
من إحدى قيم عتيدنا المهمة هي تقبل الآخر، تقبل المجتمعات المختلفة، من كان يهودي ولا درزي ولا مسيحي ولا مسلم.
يسرنا افتتاح الاحتفال النهائي للفوز الأول.
حركة الشبيبة عتيدنا.
بعد اتخاذي لقرار إني أفوت أتعلم بالمجال الأكاديمي، قلت لنفسي إنه شو ممكن أعمل غير إني أتعلم وأطور نفسي. بعد ما انضميت لعتيدنا مسؤوليتي كبرت، والمسؤولية اللي عندي تجاه الآخر كمان كبر، تجاه أولاد بلدنا، تجاه الطلاب كبر.
عتيدنا أولاً بتشتغل على الافتخار والاعتزاز بهويتنا العربية، طبعاً ثقافتنا، عاداتنا، تقاليدنا. من جهة أخرى كمان الاندماج في المجتمع الإسرائيلي، وإنه نكون جزء وإنه نأثر داخل هذا المجتمع ونكون فعالين فيه عن طريق عدة مجالات، إن كان عن طريق مجال التعليم، إن كان عن طريق مجال العمل. شوي 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 نوصل لمستقبل كثير منيح وكثير قوي لكلنا بهاي الدولة، عرباً ويهودا.
كيفك لعتيدنا؟ كيفك؟ كيفك؟
كل مواجهة مع الواقع، كل أزمة تمر تؤكد لنا على ضرورة رسالة عتيدنا. المجتمع الإسرائيلي الذي يحوينا كلنا، المعافى، المبني على الاحترام المتبادل، المبني على الحقوق المتساوية، التي يجب أن نعمل معا على الوصول إليها.
Yeah, so and for context of that, there's a group that I actually saw this recently. I'm hoping this doesn't get copyright stricken. I mean, at most, it would just mean that I just can't monetize. I mean, to be fair, my channel is it's not even monetized, but it's not a big idea. But I actually reached out to some of the people in this organization because I really feel strongly about trying to bring that to my own university. But
thank you everyone for being here. This is a very important and special dialogue, so let's get started. The ground rules will be usual. This will be civil.
For the next 90 minutes, these college students will speak hard truths to each other in the hardest of times.
I mean, what we've seen in Gaza is unprecedented. Like, it is on a different scale. There are no universities left. There are no hospitals left. It is unlivable.
But I do believe that Israel and the existence of a Jewish state in some form is necessary for the protection of Jews and the safety of Jews.
They're all students at the University of Texas, Austin, all desperate for common ground. Amidst the bloodshed in Gaza and Israel, they have family and friends in both places.
We're called Atidna, so we combine the Hebrew word Atid for future with the Arabic suffix na for our, and you put those two together, it means our future. We gave our group that name because we truly view ourselves as one family, and we think it's important to allow families to speak.
Jews, Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims, students from across America and around the globe.
I'm a Mexican-American Jew.
I am Iraqi, proud of it, and Muslim as well.
I am Palestinian American.
I'm originally from Iraq.
I'm an Israeli American Jew.
My family is Mizrahi, Sephardi, and Ashkenazi.
Elijah Collenberg founded Atidna International in 2022. He's 21 and Jewish. Jed Hashem is the group's vice president. He's 20 and Palestinian.
Can you be both pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli at the same time?
Of course,
100%.
You can be pro.
I believe firmly that you can be pro-human being first and foremost, because we are human beings, and human rights must extend to everybody on an equal level.
Historically, with human nature, it's hard to have conversation when the blood is warm.
Yeah.
Right now, the blood is hot.
Very hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so, yeah. And we still think at the end of the day that this is the time to do it. We must take action somehow. We've both had family affected.
Yeah.
This is the least that we can do to get something on the grounds here at a grassroots level.
It's a tall order. Just outside, protests erupting on UT's campus, joining the demonstration sweeping campuses nationwide.
Peaceful protesters don't riot.
More often than not, shouting begets more shouting. But in here, there's a quiet space to speak their truth and to listen.
This group is a safe space for you.
This is a safe space. I think the existence of this group, the existence of a group that has Jewish and Palestinian dialogue and Jewish-Arab dialogue, Israeli-Palestinian dialogue, sends a message.
It's so easy to resort to hate and fear, and these are all feelings that I'm sure we all have, even if we don't want to admit them. It's so easy. It's so easy to fall into these echo chambers.
If I may ask, who at this table is managing fear right now?
At the end of the day, whether we agree on stuff or not, we all agree that we are all human and that we are all worthy of respect and dignity.
October 7th was a turning point for this group.
I will say, after October 7th, there was a lot of people that said, this is no longer for me. They said that we cannot be in the same space.
Is that right? People left your group.
We had people
after
leave. We had a lot of people leave.
But the group says it began to grow again. The members even organized a vigil a month after the war began.
For UT students, to see Israeli students, Palestinian students, professors, to see faith leaders come together, that really resonated with the entire community. I think that what we did is so powerful.
When you see these images from what happened on your campus to other campuses, is there a sense of pride, like right on? Is there a sense of anxiety, fear? What's your reaction to it when you see it?
The one feeling I feel is, oh, this is going to be bad, just selfishly. I don't think people might take this anger out on Jews. They might, and they might see this as further proof that there is no middle ground and that there is no nuance. There's a lot of people that don't know what the heck they're talking about. The amount of non-Arabic leftists who are speaking over Palestinians instead of with them, and the amount of non-Jews who are speaking over Jews instead of with them is infuriating. They should be speaking with us and listening to us and uplifting our voices. Yes. They shouldn't be speaking over us. They silence us.
The most American thing that has been done is always a lot of protests have occurred on college campuses, right? Whether it be, anti-war protests, anti-apartheid in South Africa,
civil rights in the 1960s.
Civil rights, especially.
While some of them have participated in protests, their main focus is conversations like these.
I would be doing a disservice if I wasn't having dialogue. Yeah. You look at, it's the way to find solutions to this. At the end of the day, if we all want to live in the land, we got to talk somehow. We got to talk before it's too late. Find dialogue now before it's too late.
What is more authentic than allowing two people who, are portrayed as hating each other to be in the same room and say everything that they want to say without anybody telling them they can't say it.
And all we got to agree on almost.
And really even find a way to have coexistence outside of it. I think we are going chest to chest. Nothing is more brave than being able to listen to somebody that disagrees with you fundamentally and also allowing yourself to take that in.
And that's their hope. If they can build civility in a classroom on a campus, could it spread? Some of the founding fathers of America were 20-somethings, they remind me. Brilliant ideas have beaten barbarism and brutality before, so why not now? For Elijah and Jad, these meetings help foster kinship in this fraught moment.
It seems to me part of the tension is, historically and in this moment, in order for you to win, he has to lose. In order for you to win, he has to lose.
I don't believe our aspirations conflict. I think if we win, we can win as a group. If I win, Jad wins. If Jad wins, I win.
Part of me thinks, oh, that's so sweet. That's so incredibly naive. What say you?
I say people who think it's naive are those who have been stuck in the past. I think they've never been able to meet the other. And by meeting the other, you break down a world of hate.
Disappointed by leaders around the world, their activism is their answer to this dilemma, generations old.
What's your hope?
I will give 3 words: mutual understanding, nonviolence, and reconciliation. That is my hope for the future.
I will say very similarly, I think the future is unity through a common identity. I think it's viewing each other as family and not as enemies. And through doing that, we can have peace. It's going to happen one day.
Yeah, I mean, that's powerful, at least for me. And I've been talking with Jad a bit, and one of the things I definitely relate to him about, or that we both like feel the same way about, is like, and obviously I don't think that this has to mean like giving up of an identity in order to kind of go back to this or to trace it back to this, but this idea of that both Jews and Palestinians have connections to the Canaanite people. And I think there's a lot of people where it's like, oh, well, and I mean, this is part of the issue. So you either, if you only have one people claiming to be the Canaanites, because the truth is both of them have a connection, but if you only have one claiming it, then the other will attempt to weaponize it against it. And that's, I mean, basically, that's part of what happens when you have a group that's been so polemicized like the Canaanites. But I mean, at their core, they weren't really that different than the other cultures in the ancient Near East. That it's more so just an issue of whether people, think that monotheism is the only moral, acceptable type of tradition, which I think like most people would argue that even though there might have been some not so good practices in other traditions, it's not like it's exclusive to other traditions. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess it all comes down to how extremist of a religious person you are. And I mean, luckily that doesn't dictate how most people live their lives. But unfortunately, when it comes to public discourse about an entire civilization like the Canaanites, it gets easily weaponized. So, I don't know. It's something that I think it certainly would make things a lot easier if the Bible hadn't demonized the Canaanites. Because, I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like it with the Carthaginians, most people, I mean, not as many people know about the Carthaginians as they do the Canaanites. And the Carthaginians definitely do not have the same reputation as the Canaanites do. Like, for whatever reason, while the Canaanites, I mean, I guess in modern discourse, they're being viewed more this way. But even then, it's ignoring the fact that they weren't slaughtered en masse. But this idea of the Canaanite genocide is somehow viewed as righteous by a mass of people in a way. Wholesale destruction of Carthage was okay. Like nobody really, except for some hard line like Roman LARPers. We're back. But yeah, I've literally never heard. Sorry, connection is unstable. Yeah, it's I don't know, it's something with the Wi-Fi. I'm gonna close down some other tabs and find something else in the meantime. Wait, Metzora. Let's see. Oh, wait, what did I just click on? No, not this. I thought I saw something before. Oh, this looks good.
Erev, Shabbos, Kodesh, Parshas, Tazria, Metzora, and here the Torah discusses and teaches us about age. And here this Kodesh, Parshas, Tazria, Metzora
And here the Torah discusses and teaches us about a leprous-like condition, a spiritual condition, which we really don't know that much about, and we don't really have it nowadays, but there's so much to learn from it. What happens is that a simple Jew, acting his life simply, finds on his skin, it could be on his head or on his hand or anywhere on his body, he finds a nega. A nega is a sort of an affliction which appears on the skin. And he takes that nega, he takes himself and he shows it to the kohen. And when he does so, the kohen looks at it and very often puts him into badad, bidud, quarantine. So here's the person with the nega, oy vey, I have an affliction, who knows what this can possibly mean. And the kohen requires me so often to be bidud, to be in quarantine. And then there's an examination as to what type of an affliction it is. One of the main afflictions that can happen is called a netek. A netek is a type of a scraping or a disconnect which can take place on his skin. And that has its laws, its contamination, if you will, and its requirements for purity. What's interesting is that if you'll look back into possibly the oldest Kabbalah book in history, the Sefer HaYetzirah. The Sefer HaYetzirah examines every letter of the alphabet and teaches us what they mean and how they come together as words. Says the Sefer HaYetzirah that the most despised and the most frightening thing that can happen is I have a nega, a nun, gimel, ayin. But says the Sefer HaYetzirah that if you do the right thing and you turn around those letters from nun, gimel, ayin,
Agan,
you can get
igun,
ayin, nun, gimel.
oneg,
Nega, crisis. Oneg,
joy.
pleasure.
Oh, interesting.
If you take a netek, which is one of the most despised type of symptoms that one can have, and you turn around those letters, nun, taf, kuf, you get teken,
Tikkun.
a connect. From affliction, you can get, says the Sefer HaYetzirah, oneg, pleasure. From netek, which is a disconnect, you can get a connect, a teken, or a repair. What does this mean? It means that so often, when something seems wrong, we develop a symptom which frightens us. But it causes us to look inward, whether it's physically, medically, or spiritually, into our soul. And we repair it. We take care of it. Very often we go into a quarantine called a bidud. Once we repair it, we're better off than we were when we originally started. Our nega can become an oneg, our netek can become a teken. Pleasure, repair, reconnect. And how important is this in the days that the whole world is going to, fighting and with scientists and medical professionals, looking at what it is that is causing us all to be frightened and to go into this quarantine, badad. So often when we go inward, whether it's physically or whether it's spiritually, we make the introspection, which is necessary. We make the tikkun and we get a teken. So in these difficult days, let's look inward and let's take the opportunity to find out what's really going on. Let's get the inner self, the soul, shining so that we can go into this coming month. Today is Rosh Chodesh. We can go into this coming month with good health, with happiness, with pleasure, and with only hearing good news, a refuah shalema to all those that are ill, and we should all be able to go out once again and enjoy each other. Shabbat Shalom.
We look at the Torah as something that enslaves us, something that constricts us, something that limits us, something that prevents me from expressing. the freedom and beauty of my soul. But it's exactly the opposite. Shalom, everyone. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about a mitzvah that we often do not appreciate, and that is the mitzvah of counting the omer. What was the omer? The omer was a measure of barley that was brought on the second day of Pesach, and its function actually was to permit you to eat the newly grown grain. There is an issur in Eretz Yisrael, at least, of what is called chadash, new grain, and one cannot eat the grain of the new year until the korban ha'omer is brought. The Torah then says that usfartim lachem, you begin to count the omer from the day after Pesach, meaning the second day of Pesach. In Eretz Yisrael, that is already Chol HaMoed. In Chutz La'aretz, it's observed as the second day of Yom Tov. And we count 7 weeks until the holiday of Shavuos. And every single day we do count what is called the counting of the Omer. I don't want to get too involved in technicalities. There is a big machlokas among the Rishonim. If bisman hazeh, in this day and age, it is a Torah commandment or only rabbinic. Tosfos says in Menachos that since the Torah says you start the counting of the Omer from the bringing of the Omer sacrifice, the implication would be that when there's no Beit HaMikdash and there's no Omer sacrifice, you would not be obligated to count, and therefore the counting of the Omer bisman hazeh is a rabbinic enactment, zecher lamikdash, to remember the Beit HaMikdash. That is opinion number 1. Opinion number 2 is the Shita of the Rambam, who says that the counting of the Omer is independent of the korban of the Omer, and even when there's no korban Omer, you have to count 49 days. Be it as it may, whether it is a Torah commandment or a rabbinic commandment, what is the significance of counting the days between Pesach and Shavuos? And I think there's a very important lesson here. Pesach is, of course, the holiday of freedom. We have been liberated. Shavuos is the holiday of receiving God's Torah. By counting the Omer, you are creating a linkage, you are creating a connection between the holiday of freedom and the holiday of responsibility, to remind us all that freedom in and of itself is not the purpose of life. Freedom is valuable only
great power
insofar
comes great
as it
responsibility.
gives me the conditions to be able to serve God and to submit to a moral law that is greater than me. You know, people make a very big mistake when they say the purpose of my life is to be free. Free to do what? Free to be what? Even Erich Fromm, he happened to be Jewish, not religious in any way, but he was a disciple of Sigmund Freud, another Jew who happened not to be religious. But Erich Fromm once said, we make a very big mistake when we define freedom as freedom from something. That's only a negative. True freedom is freedom towards something. And therefore, the counting of the Omer makes the very essential point that don't look at Pesach and Shavuos as 2 different holidays. Rather, it is Shavuos that gives meaning and purpose and structure and direction to Pesach. Indeed, our Chazal point this out in a very graphic way. The grain offering that is brought as the Omer is barley, and Shavuos, another grain offering is brought, which are wheat loaves of bread.
Interesting.
Chazal say barley, at least before the invention of cholent, was commonly eaten by animals. Wheat is bread eaten by human beings. A Pesach without a Shavuos, you're just a wild animal. It is Shavuot that converts the animal liberation to the freedom of human dignity. And it is the counting of the Omer that makes us aware of it. In fact, the Ramban has, in a very striking way, the Ramban compares the whole Omer period to a Chol HaMoed. Like of course, Pesach has its own Chol HaMoed, but the concept is Pesach and Shavuos are one holiday joined by the Chol HaMoed of the counting of the Omer. Now, be careful not to abuse that. If you tell your boss you don't work during Chol HaMoed, you don't show up for the whole period of the Omer, your job might not be waiting for you after that period of time. But spiritually, the concept is it's a joinder, it's a fusion, it's a connection. Pesach without Shavuos, you're a wild animal, you're free. But free to do what? Free to be what? Shavuot, Matan Torah. In political terms, there is no freedom without responsibility. The great Indian poet Tagore, who had won the Nobel Prize for Literature, I believe in the 1920s, and he was not Jewish. I don't even know if he knew a Jew. But he once expressed it in a beautiful way. A human soul is like a violin string. A violin string is capable of the most beautiful music. But imagine if you just took a loose string and you put it on the kitchen table. Totally free, totally unfettered, not tied down in any way. You won't be able to get any music out of it. It is only when it's tied down, when it's committed, so to speak, it's on the instrument bridge, that the music within can be expressed. And that is a marvelous metaphor for the life of a Jew. We sometimes look at the Torah in a wrong way. We look at the Torah as something that enslaves us, something that constricts us, something that limits us, something that prevents me from expressing the freedom and beauty of my soul. But it's exactly the opposite. It's precisely in tying yourself down to God that the beauty of your soul and your true inner freedom gets revealed. And that is what we think about every one of the 49 days of the counting of the Omer. The movement from animal to human, the movement from hedonism to submission to the will of God. And that will of God is not an enslaver or a burden. That will of God enables the realization of my deepest personality, the goodness, the greatness, the beauty, the radiance that is within our neshamas. So, as the saying goes, as we count every day, let's make every day count. And that is the mitzvah of the counting of the Omer.
Sorry about that. I had a loose string and I had to tie it together like this. It doesn't look perfect, but whatever. Holy crap. Sorry, loose threads. I had to take care of a loose thread, if you know what I'm saying. And by that I mean a literal loose thread. But you know, you can just burn loose threads and you don't have to worry about it, so long as you tie them up first. Again, we're talking about actual thread. It's like, see, that's the one thing that's tricky about using phrases that mean two things. You have to clarify what you mean. Not that I'm some sort of mafioso. I mean, obviously not. I would make the worst mafioso. I think we can all agree on that. Okay, so let's see. We're done with the counting of the Omer video. So now, let's see. What is this? Counting of the Omer 2024. So let's see. What's this? Okay, yeah, I know, but is there a... This is a cool one, but I have my own. So, let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah. All right. And then here's my counter. So, let's see. So the red is for Gvura, which is the of the week, and I'll put on yellow for Tiferet, which is for the day, once I count it. Alright. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer. Hayom 10 הימים שהם שבוע אחד ו3 ימים לעומר. הרחמן הוא יחזיר לנו עבודת בית המקדש למקומה במהרה בימינו, אמן. סלה למנצח כי בי נגינות מזמור שיר אלוהים יחננו ויברכנו יאר פניו איתנו סלה לדעת בארץ דרכך בכל גויים ישועתך יודוך עמים אלוהים יודוך עמים כולם ישמחו וירננו לאומים כי תשפוט עמים ישר ולאומים בארץ תנחם. סלה יודוך עמים אלוהים יודוך עמים כולם ארץ נתנה יבואו לה יברכנו אלוהים אלוהינו יברכנו אלוהים ויראו אותו כל אפסי הארץ. ענה בכוח גדולת ימינך תתיר צרורה קבל רינת עמך סגבנו תרנו נורא הגיבור דורשי ייחודך כבוד שומרם ברכם בכם תרם רחמי צדקתך תמיר גומלי חסין קדוש ברוב טובך נאה לעבדתך יחיד נגע למך פניך זוכרן קדושותיך שבתנו קבל ושמע צעקתנו יודע תעלומותו ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ריבונו של עולם אתה ציוויתנו על ידי משה עבדיך לספור ספירת העומר כדי לטהרנו מקליפותינו ומתמותינו, כמו שכתבת בתורתך, ולשפתם לכם ממחרת השבת מיום אביאכם את עומר התנופה. 7 שבתות תמימות תהיינה, עד ממחרת השבת השביעית תספרו 50 יום כדי שתארו נפשות עמך ישראל מזוהמתם, ובכן יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שבזכות ספירת העומר שספרתי היום, יתוקן מה שפסגמתי בספירה, תפארת שבגבורה, ותאר וקדש בקדושה של מעלה, ועל ידי שפע רב בכל העולמות, ולתקן את נשפותינו וברוחותינו ונשמותינו מכל שיג ושפה, מכל שיג ופגם, ולטהרנו לקדשנו בקדושתך העליונה, amen, Selah. All right. Interesting. That was the first time that I've like fully read everything. I mean, I've counted every night of the Omer, but so for those who don't know, I mean, I'm sure you could have read that, but I will just read it. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us concerning the counting of the Omer. Today is 10 days, which is 1 week and 3 days of the Omer. May the merciful one restore us the service of the Beit HaMikdash to its place, the holy temple, or the house of holiness, or the house of the holy place, to its place speedily in our days. Amen. Selah. For the choir master, a song with instrumental music, a psalm. May God be gracious to us and bless us. May he make his countenance shine upon us forever, that your way be known on earth, your salvation among all nations. The nations will extol you, O God. Sorry, I wish I could like directly see which one is which way. All nations will extol you. The nations will rejoice and sing for you. Sing for joy. For you will judge the peoples justly and judge the nations on earth forever. The peoples will extol you, O God. All the peoples will extol you. For the earth will have yielded its produce, and God, our God, will bless us. Interesting. Seems like it's almost creating a dichotomy there. Not dichotomy, but like here, there. And then in the middle, we're in the middle. God will bless us. And all from the farthest corners of the earth shall fear him. Well, it's certainly happening now that, I mean, given I personally, I like a little bit more spice. I think that this idea of, like, oh, if it's so important to worship, only one God, or like, I don't know. I guess you could argue, well, then everyone needs to, but, well, it seems like if it's important that everybody does, it's also important that everybody makes that choice. But I don't know. For a lot of people, it's just kind of forced on them. And for me, I don't actually think that it really I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's like, at the end of the day, I don't know. When there were other traditions, Christians just kind of accepted that, okay. And I mean, same with Jews. Honestly, I really think it's with the advent of Islam starting to take over parts of really when it starts to take over parts of North Africa, which used to be like a real stronghold of the Roman Empire. And with that, as well as the Levant, then you basically have a good amount of, I'm trying to think. Yeah, by this time you're having a lot of Christian lands being taken over by Muslim forces, or by Muslim conquests. And along with this, you also have Jews living there. And so I really think that this has a lot to do with the idea of there's only one God in all of existence. To imply otherwise is heresy. Given, I don't think it was necessarily like, I don't think it was Muslims telling Jews and Christians that you have to believe this. I think that's just a natural result of living in an Islamic society. And I think that as that became the case, especially because the parts of wow, this is so true. The parts of Christianity that, the parts of the Christian world that ended up being conquered by Islam were, really what you think of as the core of a lot of like, I mean, so for context, so you have like Baghdad, which is, like in Mesopotamia, you have, sorry, a big one I'm forgetting. Oh my God. Sorry, like, what am I thinking? Yeah, Baghdad. I don't know why I thought I was thinking of something else. So mainly like Baghdad. Also, obviously, this happens much later, but Constantinople. And so really, I mean, because what I'm proposing happens a lot earlier than the fall of Constantinople. But I have a feeling that the moment that you have these great centers of scholarship, that it's not like the Christians just leave once the Muslims take over. And again, to say Muslims take over, it's probably a bit reductive. More so when, Muslim armies take over. They didn't convert, I mean, people converted, but they didn't forcibly convert everyone. The issue is, actually, no, they did forcibly convert pagans. Basically, they said, and again, I definitely, there's a lot more nuance to this. I'll admit this is my weak spot, but I do know that there were people given ultimatums, whereas you were allowed to continue to be a people of the book if you were part of that. But it was a matter of the Muslim rulers. And again, I'm not trying to say this has anything to do with all of Islam today. I'm talking about, a specific point in time that that they ended up deciding, hey, we don't want pagans amongst us, because if you have pagans amongst you, then people might start thinking that there's other gods in existence, even if they don't worship them. And that's the key point. I really think it comes down to because basically, here's the thing. If there's only one God in existence, and if you don't believe in that one God, then the idea being that you don't believe in anything. That didn't used to be the default. The default was, if you didn't believe in one God, it was probably because you believed in many gods. And believed in many gods doesn't actually mean that you worshipped many gods. It just means that you believe that they existed. And so the moment that you get this idea of, hey, these gods, they don't exist, there's only either one or none, then you're basically creating this way that, so long as someone doesn't actively start, going out saying, hey, I don't believe in this one God, then they're really not going to have issues. I mean, unless you have a society that's particularly persecutory, and it's like, well, you have to follow it exactly how we say. But I mean, in reality, that doesn't happen as much as people think. And so unless you have people actively spouting out against a religion, and see, this is the thing. this revolution, because at the end of the day, yeah, there was I remember that there was this one story of a Arabian pagan who he was, I forget if he was being burnt or beheaded. I don't know. He was being put to death because he refused to renounce his goddess, and he made some comment about that like his biggest regret isn't, or like he doesn't regret that he won't be. He regrets not that he won't be like. He regrets not that he's going to die, but that there won't be anybody left to tend to the shrine of his goddess and to like remember her. And I mean, first of all, that breaks my heart. I mean, like, regardless of what tradition it is, that breaks my heart. Like, even if you don't believe in any gods at all, that should break your heart. But the point that I'm trying to bring up, though, is that within this new paradigm that gets established, and see, there's the thing, I think you probably have Christians and Jews seeing this happen to pagans and realizing that and see, this is the thing, I really maintain that probably by this point, because Christians and Jews really did have this idea of, there's one supreme God. But this idea, like the moment that you have their neighbors stopping worshiping other gods, at least, in common religion, it might be different in folk religion, but like, at least, when people go to church, that they're not surrounded by neighbors, I mean, it gets tricky because there is no one size fits all, and it changes drastically depending on the context of Christianity. Or, I mean, with Judaism, it was less so about belief and more so about action. So, I mean, you're kind of, at the end of the day, it didn't really matter if you believed that other gods existed so long as you didn't worship them, if that makes any sense. So, how did I get to talking about this? This is a problem of having monologues. I legitimately get lost in my own sauce, which, to be fair, isn't that bad because I realize that, and I don't think too highly of my own words. I think that we need to not be attached to our own words, and then once we find words that we like, then we get attached to them, but only then. Because a lot of people say a lot of stuff that they don't mean, and then because of their ego, they double down. They're like, yeah, this is what I meant, and then they try to find ways to make it make sense. All right, let's see where we. Oh, right, about all the farthest corners of the earth shall fear him. But yeah, basically, at the end of the day, what I think really would have been the best solution and probably the least violent would be this idea of, hey, we're going to spread our knowledge of our God to the whole world, and they're all going to worship him. That's fine. That's cool. Syncretic, all good. The issue is when you have all those gods wiped out. And the thing is, you definitely have the Catholic Church doing this, though I think in a lot of cases, rather than completely wiping out these traditions, they get absorbed into the Catholic Church, and because you have a lot of syncretization. So I do want to acknowledge that. But I don't really think that this idea of actual iconoclasm, as opposed to like icono-appropriation happens a lot in Catholicism, whereas I think with Islam, that's when you have like true iconoclasm, and some of those motifs get applied to Allah, but generally but see, there's the thing, that same way that get applied to Allah, I think that same thing happens to the Jewish idea of God. And I think a lot of that probably has to do, this is what it is, I bet you, because so a lot of like so for context, like most religious Jews today, at least the ones who are like really into it and who like will talk about it with people who aren't religious, so generally those are going to be Hasidim. And the interesting thing with Hasidim is Hasidut, or like, so like chesed is like kindness, but it could also be piousness. So like I'm just going to say it like, so Hasidut is like the act, or is the essence of being a chesed, or of chesed. It's the essence of chesed is Hasidut. So with this idea, Hasidut is a type of Kabbalah, and Kabbalah originated from a Islamo-Judeo context, which then in Spain had a lot of influence from Christianity as well. But I think it's important to focus on the Islamic context and how because a lot of Islamic ideas were in turn influenced by Platonic ideas. And so I think that's And I mean, you also have some of this going on in the rabbinic era. So it would be. I don't want to pretend this is something that only happens with Islam. In fact, I have a feeling that Islam probably gets some of these ideas from Judaism in a way that Christianity doesn't, because like Judaism has more of this monotheistic focus than Christianity, but at the same time, it's like, again, not so cut and dry. At least if you go back a few more centuries. But with Judaism, I do think that a lot of these ideas of what's the term of Neoplatonism have to do with Hellenistic influence on Judaism, and in turn how that impacts Islam, and how then Islam, through Sufism and its connections to Kabbalah, then reverse impacts Judaism, so as to create this idea of not just a unified God who is responsible for everything, but also the unified and singular God. It's the idea of not just echad, but yachid. Because echad is one, the one God, the God that is one or unified, but yachid means the only. So these are two different ideas, but they both have the chad. Echad, yachad. Yachad also means together. So yachid could also, see, this is the thing. Echad means one. So one would refer to, hu echad v'hu yachid. Yeah, he's one, he's interesting, because there's a lot of, these two roots, achad, yachad, they're definitely connected. And this goes, oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm such an etymology nerd. And that's why I hope my crush likes me, and I will just leave it at that. Well, amongst many other reasons, but yeah. All right, chad. What does chad mean? Please tell me that. Chadad. Chadad. Is it further out here? Wait, chaga. Okay, let's see. Chagar. Okay, where's chadad? To be sharp or be keen. So echad. No, okay, is there another context to this? Chadad, sharpened point. Sharpened, sharp pointed. Chad, sharp. I wonder if it's this idea, because what is sharp? It's like there's, I don't know, like, I guess you could argue that if something is one-dimensional, it's sharp because it's like, it can slice through. I don't know. Chada, be or grow sharp. Chada, rejoice. Chadal. Dang it. So, chada. Is there another thing that I'm missing? Okay, there's others. So, chad can be sharp. Oh, dang it. Yeah, we saw all that. Okay. Wait, chud. Did I miss that? Or, wait, yeah, it would be lower. Chug. Chud. Chud means decline, turn aside, avoid. Chida. Riddle, enigmatic, perplexing saying, or chida. You know what? Really wanted it to be the case, but I am not a pseudo-scholar. As much as it would make things easier for my spiritual life. But no, and by that, what I mean is, as with anything, if you can just make things mean whatever you want it to, then yeah, it's kind of easy. Except for the fact that eventually, sooner or later, you're going to get hit by reality, and the fact that, oh, shoot, I just realized you guys could not see all the words I was looking at. Well, anyway, I didn't find anything, so. And again, also, nobody's watching live, so even if someone was bored, they could skip ahead. So, continuing. We implore you, by the great power of your right hand, release the captive. Amen. Seriously, Hashem protect the captives who are in Gaza as well as the innocents who are in Gaza, which is so many people. Also, this is something. I feel like just because innocent people can, just because people have this idea of the perfect victim, of someone being completely, you can totally relate to them. But the truth is that plenty of people are victimized that you can't relate to. And the moment that people realize that, I think is a big part of realizing that just because you don't relate to someone's suffering, or just because you don't, just because, which, I mean, because the truth is that there's a certain level of not ever being able to relate to what people in Gaza are going through, as well as the people who were taken hostage by Hamas and the people who were attacked by Hamas. But the point is, like, regardless of where the violence is coming from, the people experiencing violence, it's just, where was I going with this? That they should be protected. And just because someone, I mean, how like, there's a lot of really despicable people that, that live in America. And then if they were to be attacked, regardless of the context, we would still think that it wouldn't be right just by nature of them being Americans. But the thing is, it should be by nature of them being humans. And I mean, obviously not to say that people think it's all right just because someone isn't American, but it doesn't hit the same way if you're American or, whatever country you're from. And that's the sad reality. But I think that's also why, people shouldn't just say mere platitudes like, oh, may God protect, which is true. May God protect them. But at the same time, I don't know. This is why I should think about it now, why I feel so strongly, because at the end of the day, I don't truly see, and I don't know, maybe I'm going to get some flack for this, but I truly don't see the protests doing much good. I see, obviously, I think that there's people who are wrongly portraying everyone in them as anti-Semitic, but there are anti-Semitic people there. And again, I'm not using that to discount that, but I even if there weren't that, even if it was just pure and only completely 100% anti-Zionism and, nothing to do with Jews, only, concerns with, or even not necessarily anti-Zionism, but just like solely focus on, critique of Israel's war policies or Israel's policies towards the Palestinians. I think that the way that it's being done, regardless, not just because I think some of the content, not all, but some content is being used at or whether that's intentional or not, it's dividing people. But more than anything, it's the means of how people are doing it. With these rhyming chants, it sows division. At least that's what I'm seeing. And then people think that because there's people on one side and on the other, that means that one side, we're on the side of justice, and the other side, oh, they're the evil. But the truth is that people are so much more human than that. This isn't. I'm sorry, but this isn't a fucking movie. People have emotions, and it's petty, but they do. And if you want to help Palestinians and you want to stop, the genocide, I really think the biggest way to get people on the side is, for one, to start having discussions, to have conversation. And again, that doesn't mean agreeing, but I don't know. I think that so many people, they have this idea of to talk with the other side means to get shouted at. But if you have both people, regardless of how they feel, regardless of how much they disagree, regardless of whether they might, I don't know. I think that the moment that you have someone who actually hates, then it's like they're not going to make any progress until they get rid of that hate. But for the people who legitimately, they want this to end, who they want there to be peace. And again, they're not just peace, but reconciliation as well, and restitution. And by restitution, I don't mean revenge. I mean, people need to be compensated. Again, not just financially, which again is never enough, but also by making things right as much as they can, by restoring land to people who have serious legal cases. And again, it's an issue of just because there's plenty of people who don't have as much of a solid case, and it doesn't mean the point that I'm saying is there's never going to be a perfect situation, but if people actually want things to get better, not things to be perfect, because things will never be perfect. And if they are going to be perfect, it has to start somewhere. And I'm telling you, talking to Jad has given me more hope than I've had in years. And the truth is that because I connected with him over the internet, because I saw that bit from ABC, and the truth is that I mean, like, I honestly, more than anything, just because of some of the rhetoric, I haven't really hung out in many leftist circles since all this has happened. And again, I recognize that there's plenty of great people. I consider myself leftist, but there's plenty of great people who they still hang out there. But it's like I'm not in those circles because I don't feel comfortable. Like, the thing is, I almost feel like I'm being made to like to choose a side when the truth is I don't believe that there should be a side. I don't believe that there should be sides. And that's one of the things I really love that I either sent to Jad or that you sent to me. But the point, though, is that I want to talk with people who they see a future beyond Israel and Palestine, and they just see the people who are there. And the people who are there that's a tricky thing because there's so much baggage to the term Israel or Palestine. I really think we should just go back to use the term Canaan. That, there might be people who identify as Israelites or as Palestinians, but at the end of the day, they're Canaanites. And that, then there's also the issue of making sure that everyone has equal. But see, there's another thing. The reason why a lot of people have this issue with the idea of like a one state or like this, creating this unified identity is because they're afraid that, it's just a guys and then, we'll be outpopulated. But no, the thing is, I honestly think that the future is a new identity, the identity of being one people with many different religions. I mean, the truth is that, there's Christian Lebanese, there's Muslims in Lebanon, there's Christians in Lebanon. There used to be a lot of Jews in Lebanon until the war. But the point is that nobody would say that someone is less Lebanese because they're this religion or that. I mean, I'm sure you have the fascists who would argue that, but what I'm trying to say though is that if you had like this new joint state that, and I know it's a total pipe dream, but if you had this new joint state that was Canaan, and then you had people that they might identify, or they might be Jewish, and then those Jews might identify as Israelis even still, and that's fine, so long as the state respects the rights of both peoples and ensures their equality. And I think with that, eventually you're going to have this new hybrid identity of Canaanites who, more than identifying as Jews or as Muslims or as Christians, or maybe they continue to identify that way, but more than identifying as Israelis or Palestinians, they identify as Canaanites. I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people who would probably look at me as insane for saying that, but like, at the end of the day, I really think that that's the one thing that unifies people above all else. But simultaneously, the religious radicals would also hate that idea because of the implications of admitting and revealing that the Canaanites were not horrible people. I mean, if you hear the criticisms that a lot of religious people have of the Canaanites, has a lot to do with their with perceptions around certain types of idol worship, which involve, I mean, let's just say it's stuff that I don't know. I feel like there's probably some variance, but generally no pagan would actually agree with today, like, except for some and again, like, for context, it's stuff that involves like the use of like bodily fluids and also like excrement and religious ritual. But again, as to how much of this is true is kind of the tricky thing. So, point being though, unified land of Canaan, no more, less bloodshed, hopefully, and eventually, hopefully, no bloodshed. No, low to no. And, yeah, I mean, shoot, if there's one thing that I want to do with my degree, my knowledge of the past, is use it to help save the future. And I know that sounds super, super delusional because, trying to stop violence, when has that worked before? But if you don't try, then who the fuck are you? All right, let's continue, and then we'll actually start. We implore you by the great power of your right hand. Release the captive. Accept the prayer of your people. Strengthen us. Purify us, awesome one, mighty one. We beseech you, guard as the apple of your eye those who seek your oneness. Bless them, cleanse them, bestow upon them forever your merciful righteousness, powerful Holy One, and your abounding goodness. Guide your congregation, only an exalted one. Turn to your people who are mindful of your holiness. Accept our supplication and hear our cry, you who know secret thoughts. In other words, the secret God police. Blessed be the name of the glory of his kingdom forever and ever. Master of the universe, you have commanded us through Moses, your servant, to count Sefirat HaOmer in order to purify us from our evil and uncleanness. As you have written in your Torah, you shall count for yourselves from the day following the day of rest, from the day on which you bring the Omer as a wave offering. The counting shall be for 7 full weeks. Until the day following the 7th week shall you count 50 days, so that the souls of your people Israel may be cleansed from their defilement. Therefore, may it be your will, Lord our God, and God of our fathers, that in the merit of the Sefirat HaOmer, which I counted today, the blemish that I have caused in the Sephirah, Tiferet, that is Shebe Gvora, the Tiferet, or like the splendor, or no, the beauty or harmony, Shebe, that is in Gvora, that is in strength, be rectified, and I may be purified and sanctified with supernal holiness. May abundant. Oh, sorry, I said that already. So yeah, so we're adding the song now, and then have the chamsa watching my back. All right, so Tiferet Shebe. Where'd it go? Tiferet Shebe. Tiferet Shebe Gvora. Be rectified, and I may be purified and sanctified with supernal holiness. May abundant bounty therefore be bestowed Therefore may abundant bounty be bestowed upon all the worlds. May it rectify our nefesh, our soul, ruach, our spirit, and neshama. Nefesh, like our body, our ruach, our spirit, v'neshama, and our soul. Sorry, I'm trying to figure this. And our soul. Neshama. May it rectify our nefesh, ruach, and neshama from every baseness and defect. May it purify and sanctify us with your supernal holiness. Amen, Selah. Oh, okay, we're done with that, at least. All right. I really like the look of this. I wonder how. It's going to look really cool when it's like the red coming down from the yellow. Oh, this. I love this. And maybe I should have worn red. Okay, let's see. And then you can see. You can see it. Israel Chai. Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu 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 Chai. Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Yisroel Chai. Am Yisroel Chai. Am Yisroel, Am Yisroel, Am Yisroel Chai. Evenu Shalom Aleichem. Evenu Shalom Aleichem. Evenu Shalom Aleichem. Evenu Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. Siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov. Yeheilahaynu, 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 Uvechol Yisroel. Yeheilahaynu, Yeheilanu, Uvechol Yisroel. David melech Yisroel, Chai v'kayom. David melech Yisroel, Chai v'kayom. Mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, yeheilanu. All right. So now moving into the prayer before starting to read, even though I'm not going to be reading. Barechu et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher בחרמנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. Alright, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to do this. Alright, subscriptions. Is there any way to just show me who all I subscribe to? Oh, I think they're signing up with the size of the screen, maybe? Huh, that's weird. That's actually really weird. I don't know how to go specifically. Subscriptions. I'm pretty sure. Let's see. It was Shael, I think. I just don't remember. Torah. Shael Kriel. I was right. I just misspelled it. Oh, I love that intro. All right, let's see. Where are we at? Leviticus. We are on. Okay, we read Shemini. All right, Metzora. We are starting with Metzora.
Wait the big.
I'm going to try to read along for a while, but no promises. Okay.
זאת תהיה תורת המצורע ביום טהרתו ומובא אל הכהן ויסע הכהן אל מחוץ למחנה וראה הכהן והנה נרפא נגע השרע מן השרוע וספר הכהן ולקח דם טהר שתי ציפורים חיות טהורות ועץ
Yeah, once I want to mute myself because I'm all... Oh shit, no. Dang it. Huh. Actually, this looks really good. I like how it looks. See, and then also, theoretically, I do wonder whether I could also... Oh, this is actually really cool. So I can have it wrap around all the way if I want to. That way I can get this nice look of like a yellow rim. But I'm not going to do that because how else am I supposed to get air conditioning? Literally, this is better than having a fan. This is just as good as having a fan on you. Given, ooh, I need to invent something that just flaps this for me. That way it's like completely hands-free. If I do that, I literally think that I've beaten life. And by beaten life, I mean one life. Holy crap, I need to find a way to do this. Because I've seen something like this, but it's for shirts where it does it like this. But that doesn't really do much. But this, I'm actually starting to get cold now. I'm starting to, oh, this is really nice. And because any sweat you have, it kind of wicks it. So that just creates this nice cold feeling. No, seriously, this is, these sudras have been one of the best investments that I've made in a long time. And it's because I feel like it's good for my body because it's keeping me protected from the sun and keeping me, you know, nice and not so hot. It's protecting my... I'm trying to think what the difference would be. I guess maybe spirit. It's keeping my spirits up because I like wearing it. And then my soul because it's connected to my identity and to being Jewish. That's interesting. Wait. Oh yeah, you can see the white pattern where it's kind of like a spiral. At first I thought it was leaching out, but then I realized it was... Honestly, I kind of would have preferred if it was just completely yellow, not going to lie. But you know what? Sometimes it's good to be reminded that even when things look like piss, there's still a bright spot somewhere. I don't know. I'm struggling for ideas for that. But anyway. Oh. And then this, by the way, yeah, this potential crush, well, not potential crush, but this crush, potentially something more. She stood up for me when someone was giving me shit about my sutra. So, literally, fellas, if a lady sticks up for you in your sutra, she's a keeper. But again, I don't know where or if things are going to go anywhere. And so, you know, I guess this is just me putting out this somewhere to hopefully show her later if things do work out and be like, you know, hey, I was so inspired, so excited that I had to share it. And obviously I'm, you know, trying to keep my private life private, but I did just want to share that little bit that I might have met someone who I think could be really good for me, but I also don't know if it'll go anywhere. At the very least, now I kind of know what type of person I am looking for. And more than anything, I'm glad to have this person in my life, even if it's just as a friend, because I've literally never met someone so amazing. And honestly, I don't know, like maybe it's just, I don't know. I feel like there's some signs there. And then, like, I'm someone who does not read signs well, but like, this is the first time anything feels deliberate. So I don't know. Here's hoping, you know. Also, this is not like a Christian cross. This is a tough cross because the tough was originally like this. And then what's interesting is, whoa, this is actually really trippy. So it keeps it like this, but then the one of the hooks goes off and becomes the foot. So it's like this. Ooh, this is actually really cool. I might recreate it. I might try to show. Oh my god! Also, she has ADHD, just like almost as bad, if not worse. I don't know. I I don't view it as a worse thing, but the point is that we both have really bad ADHD and we kind of connect over that. So I don't know. She's the first. Holy crap! I don't know. I'm also just vocalizing this, but she is really one of the first people I've ever met that makes me feel like affirmed about myself. I mean, not that I don't feel affirmed. I mean, I feel self-affirmed, but it's like from other people, like in this deep way that goes beyond just like, oh, you're smart. I mean, I'm no fucking genius, but like people do tell me I'm smart, and that's nice and everything, but it's like my brain's up here. I definitely connect to people through my brain, but it's like if people just connect to my brain and that's it, it's kind of like, for lack of a better term, it's a blue brain effect. I'm like, I want to talk more. But I don't know. It's a blessing and a curse. It's also kept me from getting into bad relationships. So, I mean, like, I don't know. It's like, being a picky eater might not be the best thing, but if it keeps you from accidentally, eating something that's poison, I mean, that's a bad example because, obviously what things are going to be poisonous versus, regular foods. But the point is like, sometimes being a bit over picky can be a good thing, so long as you don't, you don't let it. Anyway, holy crap. This is why I need a co-host. I will literally see, that's the thing. I'm not talking to myself right now. I'm talking to the ether. Because I'm aware that, people are / potential. Well, not right now. People know it. Nobody's watching, but people will watch this. And wait, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, I don't know. Trust me. I wish I had half as interesting conversations with myself, but the truth is I really don't talk to myself that much. Maybe that's something I need to work on more. Just having these more like internal discussions with myself. But the truth is, this isn't an internal discussion. This is me as if it's like I talk. So, I mean, for lack of a better term, this is almost like this would be like my train of thought if I was talking with someone, but then I had just been talking and then I get an idea. So I talk about something else and I talk about something else. But also, luckily, I know when to shut up when I'm talking with her. I like talking, but I like listening more. At least when it comes to some people. Anyway, I am going to move on because I'm just a mush right now, in a good way. I really, really hope things go well. But you know what? B'siyata d'shmaya, with the help of heaven. And if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. If it is, it is. At the end of the day, I feel more sure of myself in a lot of ways. Anyway. Oh, right. I'm sorry. I forgot. Share screen. Yeah, I accidentally knocked off the this share screen. Okay, so I'm just going to be taking some dabs while I read along. All right, wait. So let's figure this out. So what is 30 times? How would I figure this out? 1.5. So if it's 1. Wait. So if it's 30 minutes, how would I figure this out? I'm not good at math. Okay, so if divided by point, no. Times. You know what? I don't need to figure out how long it's going to be. It's not a big deal. I'm just going to listen.
وشني طلع وإزوب وصبا هكوهين وشحات إتحسبوها إحاث الكلي حيرس عالمايم حييم إتحسبوها حيا نقاحوتا وإتعيسها قيرز وإتشينيها الطلعت وإتها إزوب وطبال وإيه هصبورها حيا بدم هصبورها الشقطة عال هماي ها حيين وهزا عال هم الطاهر من هالصراعة شبع بعمين ويطيها روب ويشلاح هصبورها حيا عال بيني هالسدي ويخبيس هم الطاهر את בגדיו, וגילה את כל שערו, ורחץ במים, וטהר, ואחר יבוא אל המחנה, וישב מחוץ לאהלו 7 ימים, והיה ביום השביעי יגלה את כל שערו, את ראשו ואת זקנו ואת גבות עיניו ואת כל שערו יגלח, וכיבס את בגדיו ורחץ את בשרו במים וטהר. וביום השמיני ייקח 2 כבשים תמימים וחמסה אחת בת שנתה תמימה ו3 עשרונים סולת מנחה ולולב השמן ולוך אחד שמן והעמיד הכהן המטהר את האיש המטהר ואותם לפני אדוני פתח אוהל מועד, ולקח הכהן את הכבש האחד והקריב אותו לאשם ואת לוח השמן והניף אותם תנופה לפני אדוני, ושחט את הכבש במקום אשר ישחט את החטאת ואת העולה במקום הקודש, כי כחטאת האשם לכהן קודש קודשים הוא, ולקח הכהן מדם האשם ונתן הכהן על תנור אוזן המטהר הימנית ועל כהן ידו הימנית.
Oh, you know, actually, I just realized. Oh, actually, never mind. I'm not going to ask him. I was going to ask Koletz if he wants to join me, but he kind of hates the Hebrew Bible. And I mean, I don't know. Like, I'd say I don't blame him, except for the fact that, like, I think he's a bit too harsh with that. Mainly just because of the fact that I personally think the Hebrew Bible is just an evolution of the Canaanite tradition. I mean, like, literally, you have this mention to the Asham offerings, the guilt offerings. But Asham is also the same root as Ashima, who is the fate of goddess. I mean, goddess of fate. Is it possible that it's like a fate offering so that your fate will be good, not bad, because you're guilty of... I don't know. Totally a stretch. I'll admit that. But I do think it's worth exploring. But yeah, he's not the person to invite on for this. And also, I don't know, I forgot. I also need to finish this up soon. But yeah, you know what? It would be kind of fun to try to, like, I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner. I think I'm going to try to rewrite Sanchuniathon's Phoenician cosmogony in Semitic, like in Hebrew. I mean, obviously it was originally written in Phoenician, so it wouldn't be a perfect parallel. But write it in Hebrew and fill in the blanks, or like the things where, because there's clear discrepancies. Oh, great. Hold on one second. I just gotta, let's see. What's this? Apparently there's people who think that Julius Caesar was Jesus Christ. Well, that's a laugh. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, what was I saying? Basically that it would be fun to rewrite Sanchuniathon's cosmogony in Semitic, because that's the language it was originally written in, and try to reconstruct some of these etymologies, or like, oh my god, I would have so much fun with this. I'm actually going to do this sometime, maybe over the summer. You know what? I mean, I don't have a lot of an interactive audience. I used to have more, especially, when I had more people that I went live with, like on their channels. But you know what? better to be with people that are good to be around than people who put you down. But in any case, let's see, what was I saying? All right, that I would like to write that at some point and then to have viewer input. And realistically, I would just have to find another YouTuber who I'm tight with that's honestly someone like 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐿, because I really want to be a part of this Canaanite Renaissance. And I don't believe that to be a Canaanite means to reject Judaism, and I don't believe that to be a Canaanite means to reject Islam either. I think that to be a Canaanite means to embrace the cultural identity of the region. And if there are people who want to embrace the religious aspect of that as well, it's up to them. I mean, the idea of, a free land, regardless of what that land is called, is this idea of freedom of religion as well. And that's ideally what people are calling for, whether it's a free Palestine or a free Israel or whatever, is just a state that respects the rights of all. And since realistically, so long as people are in treachery, anyway, oh my God, I'm getting back into that. And by that I mean I'm not going to. So let's see. And this, of course, this came undone right when everything falls apart, and that's why you have to keep fighting to put it back together. Because just because it falls apart doesn't mean that you just throw away the towel. Okay.
ولقاح الكوهن من لوح الشامن ويصاق عالكاف الكوهن السماليف وطبال الكوهن إذ إصبعه هيمانيف من الشامن أشير عالكبو السماليف وهزة من الشامن بإصبعه شبع بعميم لفني أدوناي ومياتر الشامن أشير عالكبو يتين الكوهن.
This is interesting. So the same three letters that are in the root for shemen, shin, mem, nun, are also in nasham, which means to breathe. Maybe it's like smelling the oil, you're breathing in the oil, or at least the smell from the oil. Oof. Sorry, I accidentally scratched my head.
أوزن هم الطاهر هيمانيت وعلى بوهن يدو هيمانيت وعلى بوهن رجلو هيمانيت عال دامها أشام وهالنوثاب بشير أشر عالكاف هكوهن يتين على روش هم الطاهر وخيبير على هكوهن لفني أدوناي وعسى هكوهن أصام الطار وخيبير على الطاهر بطمعته وأحال يشحط إثها علا وهي علا هكوهين إثها علا وإثهم منها هم مزبيحة وخبير على هكوهين وطاهر وإمداله وإن يدو مسيغي ولقاح كيبس إحاد أشام لفنوفا لخبير علو وعيسارون سولي إحاد بالول بالشمن لمنحاد ولو شامن وشتي ثورين أوشني بني يونا أشير تسيغ يدو وهيا إحاد حطات وها إحاد علا وهذي أوثان بيوم هشميني لطاهرة الهكوهن البيتح المعيد يفني أدوناي ولقاح هكوهن إذ كيبس هاشام وإثلو هشامين وليف أوثان هكوهن تنوفا لفني أدوناي وشحات את כבש האשם, ולקח הכהן מדם האשם, ונתן על תנוך אוזן המטהר הימנית, ועל בוהן ידו הימנית, ועל בוהן רגלו הימנית, ומן השמן יסוק הכהן על כף הכהן הסמלית, והיזה הכהן באצבעו הימנית מן השמן אשר על כפו הסמלית 7 פעמים לפני אדוני, ונתן הכהן מן השמן אשר על כפו על תנוך אוזן המטהר הימנית, ועל בוהן ידו הימנית, ועל בוהן רגלו הימנית, על מקום דם האשם, והנותר מן השמן אשר על כף הכהן ייתן על ראש המטהר לכפר עליו לפני אדוני, ועשה את האחד מן התורים או מן בני היונה מאשר תסיר ידו את אשר תסיר ידו, את האחד חטאת ואת האחד עולה על המנחה, וכיפר הכהן על המטהר לפני אדוני. זאת תורה אשר בו נרע צרעת, אשר לא תסיר ידו בטהרתו. וידבר אדוני אל משה ואל אהרון לאמור, כי תבואו אל ארץ כנען אשר אני נותן לכם לאחוזה, ונפלתי נגע צרעת בבית ארץ אחוזתכם, ובה אשר לו הבית, והגיד לכהן לאמור, נראה לי בבית מסובך הכהן, ופינו את הבית בטרם יבוא הכהן לראות את הנגע, ולא יטמע כל אשר בבית, ואחר כן יבוא הכהן לראות את הבית, וראה את הנגע, והנה הנגע בקירות הבית, שחרורות ירקרקות או אדמדמות, ומראין שפל מן הפיר, ויצא הכהן מן הבית אל פתח הבית, והסגיר את הבית 7 ימים, וישב הכהן ביום השביעי וראה, והנה פסע הנגע בקירות הבית, וסובב הכהן וחילצו את האבנים אשר בהן הנגע, והשליכו אתהן אל מחוץ לעיר אל מקום טמא, ואת הבית יפציע מבית סביב, ושפכו את העפר אשר יכסו אל מחוץ לעיר אל מקום טמא, ולקחו אבנים אחרות והביאו אל תחת האבנים, ועפר אחר ייקח וטח את הבית, ואם ישוב הנגע ופרח בבית, אחר חילץ את האבנים, ואחרי יפצות את הבית, ואחרי התואר מובא הכהן וראה, והנה פסע הנגע בבית, צרעת ממארת היא בבית טמא הוא, ונפס את הבית, את אבניו ואת עשיו ואת כל עפר הבית, והוסיף אל מחוץ לעיר אל מקום טמא, והבא אל הבית כל ימי הסגיר אותו יטמע עד הערב, והשוכב בבית יכבס את בגדיו, והאוכל בבית יכבס את בגדיו, ואם בוא יבוא הכהן וראה, והנה לא وعسى النيغة ببايت أخري يطوع إثبايت وطيها الكوين إثبايت كين ربا الناغة ولقا لحطيك إثبايت شتي سبوري وعيس إيرز وشنيث نولا وإزوذ وشحاب إثسبورها إيحات الكلي حيرس على المايم حيين ولقا إثعيسها إيرز وإثها إزوذ وإث شني هالتولا حصبورها حيا وطفى الأثام بدم حصبورها الشحوطة وغمايمها حيين وهزاء الهبايث شبع بعميم وحطيت هبايث بدم حصبور وغمايمها حيين وبصبورها حيا وبعيسها إيرز وغائزو وبشنيها الدولا وشلا تصبو ها حيا الميحوس لعير البني هالسادي ويخبر على باي وطاهر.
That's a direct parallel. So listen to this. The hyssop, he shall take the wood of cedar and the hyssop and the crimson dyed wool and the bird that is living, and he shall dip them into the blood of the bird that was slaughtered, and into the water from the spring, and he shall sprinkle toward the house 7 times. He shall purify the house with the blood of the bird, and with the water from the spring, and with the bird that is living, with the wood of cedar, with the hyssop, and with the crimson dyed wool. He shall send away the bird that is living towards the outside of the city, towards the surface of the field, and he shall provide atonement upon the house. So this is just like the scapegoat offering, except in this case it's a bird. And what's kind of interesting is that there's people who have pointed out before that, and again, I feel like some people could take this the wrong way. I'm not necessarily, I'm not saying that this is the case. I'm just saying that this is, what people thought, and then the symbolism associated it with them even afterwards. But so the dove imagery, very, very closely connected with Asherah. We're talking about doves there, are we? No, we're just talking about birds in general. But birds in general connected with Asherah. Anything that has wings and flies, basically. Okay, actually, that's a bit reductive. Basically, anything that's feminine and flies for the most part. Even that's a bit reductive, but we'll return to this later. So you have the bird, which is like Asherah, and probably I would not be surprised at all if birds were offered to Asherah. But anyway, so then you have what else is there? You have the you have the bull, right? And with the bull is connected to El. And from there, what else do we have? Then the goat. And the goat's connected very closely with probably, I would argue, Yahweh, because of the fact that, there's a lot of imagery there associated with the goat, especially like the idea of the shofar being the ram's horn, whereas there's bull's horns as well, but there's very specifically used ram horns. Too much to go into right now, but basically the idea of the bull offering, which is kind of like, I could analyze this to hell. You know what? Let's just move on. All right, we shall continue now. Excuse me, what the heck is a sapacha or a sais? Liseis or Lisapachath. Sapachath. Oh, interesting. I have no clue. Saras of the garment and of the house and of the seas and of the sapatras of the Bahereth. Interesting. Imagine you name your. Imagine you're some random person doesn't know any Hebrew, and you happen to be like, you know what? I am going to take a Hebrew Bible. I'm going to open it up to a random verse, and wherever my finger lands, I'm going to name my kid after that because that is what God wants me to name my kid. And you end up landing on Sapachath, or you end up landing on Bahareth, and you end up settling with Beth for short. Honestly, Sarah's kind of a badass name, not gonna lie. Se'eth or Se'eth. I mean, it's like Seth. Now, Sapachath sounds like Sabato. What was it? Sabato. I don't know. Anyway, continuing on.
لخليغة الصراع ولا النافق والصراعات حبيغ ولا باي ولا سيف ولا سباح ولا بهاري لهروز بيوم هالطمي وبيوم هالطهور زوز التراث الصراعات ويدبر أدوناي المشيك من الأهرون لمور دبروا البني إسرائيل وأمرتهم أليم إيش كي يبزق من بسرو زوبو طمئون بيزوز تيهكم أثو بزوبو راك بسرو اتزوبو وهتيم بسرو بالزوبو ومأثو ولم مشكاف أشر يشكاف على هزاف يطمع ويخل هكلي أشر يشيف على يطمع أشر يقع بمشكابه يخبس بغدا ورحاس بماي ويطمع على عارم ويشيف على هكلي أشر يشيف على هزاف يخبس بغدا ورحاس بماي ويطمع على عارم وهالنوغيع بيبسا هزاف يخبس بغدا ورحاس بماي ويطمع على عارف وخياروك هزاف بالطهور وخبس بغدا ورحاس بماي ويطمع على عارف ويقول مركاب أشر يركب على هزاف يطمع ويقول النوغيع بيقول أشر تحته يطمع على عارف وهالنوسي قتام يخبس بغدا ورحاس بماي ويطمع على عارف ويقول أشر يقعبو هزاف ويادا لو شطف بماي ويخبس بغدا ورحاس بماي ويطمع على عارف وخلي حارس أشر يقعبو هزاف يشابر ويقول كل عيس يشاطف بماي وخيطار هزاف من الزبور ويسافر له 7 يمين لطهورته وخبز بغدا ورحاس بسرو بمايم حيين وطهير وبيوم هالشميني يقح له شتين ثورين وشني بني يونا وغا لفني أذناي البيتع المعيد والثنام الهكوهين وعزاء أثم هكوهين إحاد حطات وها إحاد علا وخبر على هكوهين لفني أذناي مزدوبو وإيش كيف صين منه شخبة زرع ورعاس بماين את בשרו וטמא עד הערב וכל בגד וכל עור אשר יהיה עליו שכבת זרע וכובס במים וטמא עד הערב ואישה אשר ישכב איש אותה שכבת זרע ורעסו במים וטמאו עד הערב ואישה כפי יהיה זבה דם יהיה זובה בבשרה 7 ימים תהיה ונידתה וכל הנוגע בה יטמע עד הערב וכל אשר תשכב עליו ונידתה יטמע וכל אשר תשב עליו יטמע וכל הנוגע במשכבה יכבס בגדיו ורחס במים וטמא עד הערב וכל הנוגע בכל כלי אשר תשב עליו יכבס בגדיו ורחס במים וטמא עד הערב ואם על המשכב הוא או על הכלי אשר היא יושבת עליו ונועבו יטמע עד הערב ואם שחור ישכב איש אותה ותהי נידתה עליו וטמא 7 ימים וכל המשכב אשר ישכב עליו יטמע ואישה יזוב זוב דמה ימים רבים בלא עת נידתה או חיפזו על נידתה כל ימי זוב טומאתה כי מת נידתה תהיה טמאה היא כל המשכב אשר תשכב עליו כל ימי זובה כמשכב נידתה יהיה לה וכל הכלי אשר תשב עליו טמא יהיה כטומאת נידתה וכל הנוגע בם יטמא וכיבס בגדיו ורחס במים וטמא עד הערב ואם טהרה מזובה וספרה לה 7 ימים ואחר תטהר וביום השמיני תפתח לה 2 תורים או 2 בני יונה והביאה אותם אל הכהן אל פתח אוהל מועד ועשה הכהן את האחד חטאת ואת האחד עולה וכיפר עליה הכהן לפני אדוני מזוב טומאתה והזהרתם את בני ישראל מטומאתם ולא ימותו בטומאתם וטמאתם את משכני אשר בתוכם זאת תורת הזב ואשר תצא ממנו שכבת הזרע לטומאתה והדווה בנידתה והזב את זובו לזכר ולנקבה ולאיש אשר ישכב עם טמאה.
All right. So now we're going to listen to the little shtick about Achrei Mot. Achrei Mot. After the death, Achrei Mot of Moshe. Let's see. History.
Hi, I'm 𝐤𐤇𤓉𝐿, and welcome to the Parshah Rabbit Hole, where I find something. Hi, I'm 𝐤𐤇�𝐿, and welcome to the Parshah Rabbit Hole, where I find something weird in the weekly Torah portion and follow it all the way down until it gets even weirder. This week's rabbit hole eventually gets us to the common denominator between mental illness and faith, and the question of whether it's a good idea to be friends with gremlins. But as always, we have to get there. This week's rabbit hole is dedicated to everyone who has sponsored an episode or made a donation. It's a good idea to be friends with gremlins. But as always, good idea to be friends with gremlins.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, but I refuse to believe whoever made that did not intend for that to be dirty. Like, come on. This literally looks like you know what, and I'm not saying it.
But as always, we have to get there.
Oh, shoot. Wait a second.
Always a good idea to really gets us to the common denominator and faith. And
You're
the
going
question
his
of whether it's
face?
a good idea to be friends with gremlins.
Oh my god.
But as always, we have to get there. This week's Rabbit Hole is dedicated to everyone who has sponsored an episode or made a donation to the Rabbit Hole so far. Thank you again so much, all of you. And for the rest of you, go to creativejudaism.com/donate to dedicate an upcoming episode or just to make a small donation to help me keep on digging. All right, let's get started. This week's episode is going to be a little bit shorter than I originally wanted it to be. I actually had a lot more stuff that I wanted to share, but it was hard to get a rabbit hole done at all this week. With Pesach and everything, I was busy. So there's not as much as I wanted to share with you, but there's still a lot of really fun stuff. So let's get going. In this week's Torah portion, Parshas Achrei, we learn all the details of all the sacrifices and stuff for Yom Kippur.
It sounds so made up, Yom Kippur.
And then after that, there are a bunch of other prohibitions, and it's one of those prohibitions that originally caught my attention when I was looking through the Parsha. And that's what I jumped into, and I followed all the sources, and I had a whole rabbit hole. But then I realized that one of the weirdest things in all of Judaism is actually in the Yom Kippur part at the beginning of the Parsha, and that's the scapegoat. And I felt like I couldn't ignore that.
They are trying to make me an scapegoat.
This is what it says in the Parsha.
That's funny. An scapegoat.
That's the scapegoat. And I felt like I couldn't ignore that.
They are trying to make me an scapegoat.
This is what it says in the Parsha. Aaron shall put lots on the two goats, one lot for Hashem and one lot for Azazel. So this is a famously confusing ritual. The Kohen Gadol is supposed to take two identical goats, and one of them is randomly selected to be brought as a sacrifice to Hashem, and the other is randomly selected to go to Azazel, which raises a lot of questions. Among those questions are, who or what is Azazel? And how could we offer a sacrifice to anything other than God? It's all very weird. And it gets even weirder because the goat that goes to Azazel is sent into the wilderness, into the desert. And by sent, it means thrown off a cliff. So yeah, even weirder. Which you'd think would make for a perfect topic for the rabbit hole. But, like I said, it's pretty famously weird, and I like to try to go for the more obscure weird. And as I said earlier, I already found that obscure weird thing that I was excited about, and it was something else entirely. But when I was digging around for Azazel stuff, just to cover all my bases, I found a very strange commentary from Ibn Ezra, which ends off with a cryptic clue.
But I found the clues that will safely take us through.
And when I followed that clue, it led me right back to the thing that I originally wanted to look into. So that's where this week's rabbit hole starts, with a clue about one of the most famously weird things in Judaism that takes us on a treasure hunt through Torah that leads us to another weird thing. So if you're ready to follow that clue, let's dive in. Okay, so first of all, what's Azazel? Rashi gives us an answer that's on the more grounded side of the spectrum of explanations given for this. He says, quoting from the Medrash, that Azazel is the name of a particularly jagged mountain. But Hizkuni gives us an answer from the other side of the spectrum, based on a different Medrash. He says, quoting from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, that the goat that's sent to Azazel is given to the Satan, the prosecuting angel whose job it is to prosecute against us on Yom Kippur and get us in trouble. And the goat is given to the Satan as a bribe so that he'll leave us alone. So yeah, that's weird. But those two sides of the spectrum also lead to two sides of a different problem. If Azazel is a place and not some other different thing other than Hashem, then both of the goats are sacrifices to Hashem, in which case the Azazel goat isn't following the laws of how we're supposed to offer a sacrifice, which is, there's specific laws of how to slaughter it, and it's clearly not anything to do with throwing live animals off cliffs, at least not normally. But if Azazel is some other entity, then it's obviously not a sacrifice. It can't be, because we wouldn't ever offer a sacrifice to anything except for Hashem. Either way, there are problems, and either way, it's weird.
You sure about that?
Into Ibn Ezra. He starts out by offering some possibilities for what the name Azazel means, which he seems to reject. Then he mentions an explanation from one of the Go'anim about how the Azazel goat is still a sacrifice to Hashem, even though it's not slaughtered properly. But then he rejects that and says, you don't need to jump through those hoops because it wasn't a sacrifice. In which case, we're back to Azazel being something other than God. So what is it? But instead of telling us what it is, he gives us a weird riddle. He says, I will reveal a little bit of its secret to you in a hint, which is, when you are 33 years old, you will understand it.
He is...
Oh. Saturn. Because Saturn comes every 33 years.
33 years old.
And that's it. That's all he gives us. When you're 33 years old, you'll understand. At first, I thought it might be kind of like not learning Kabbalah until you're 40 years old, just with a different and much more specific number. But none of the commentaries I saw explained it that way. But when I started digging around, I found that there's actually a lot more interesting explanations of that riddle. One obscure commentary explained it by cheating a little bit. He says that he saw a version of the text where instead of the word shanim, which means years, it said shinayim, which means teeth. When you are a person who has 33 teeth, you'll understand. But human beings normally only have 32 teeth, and that's including the wisdom teeth, in which case, according to this, Ibn Ezra was saying, you'll never know what it means, which is kind of a bummer of a riddle. You put in all this work to solve it, and then when you do, there's no payoff.
These questions that are bothering you, Larry, maybe they're like a toothache.
I love this.
Feel them for a while, then they go away.
They go
But
away.
I like the teeth thing. I thought it was cool. But most commentaries agree on a different interpretation of Ibn Ezra's riddle. They say that it means that you should count 33 verses from the verse about Azazel, and then you'll get to the answer. So when I saw that, I loved it. I love the idea of a commentary sending me on a treasure hunt through Torah. So where does it take us? Well, if you count 33 verses from Perek Tes Zayin Pasuk Ches, chapter 16, verse 8, you get to Perek Yud Zayin Pasuk Zayin, chapter 17, verse 7, which says, "V'lo yizbechu oid az zivcheihem la'seirim asher heim zonim achareihem." They shall no longer slaughter their sacrifices to the seirim after which they go astray.
The satyrs.
This verse comes after a prohibition of offering sacrifices outside of the temple, and then it gives us this prohibition to no longer offer sacrifices to the seirim. And this is a thing that I originally wanted to do the rabbit hole on to begin with. And Ibn Ezra, we'll get to what the seirim are in a moment, but just
So this is interesting. So they're sacrificing or offering up or throwing off the seirim. So basically what they're doing, it's almost like it's an iconoclasm. They're showing their faith to God, according to this, by killing the seirim. Interesting. It's also interesting. So apparently, and I think it would be spelled differently, I think, but there's this joke about Ezra is Ezra. Ez being goat and Ra being evil. Evil goat.
Just to recap the Ibn Ezra thing, based on this interpretation of the riddle, Ibn Ezra is saying that the goat that's given to Azazel is given to one of these seirim, which we're told explicitly not to offer sacrifices to. But that's okay, because he's also of the opinion that this cliff goat isn't a sacrifice. So that answers the riddle, but now we've got new questions. Who are these seirim that the Israelites apparently used to offer sacrifices to, which were explicitly prohibited from doing anymore, but that according to Ibn Ezra, we're still supposed to throw a goat off a cliff for? If you remember earlier when we were talking about the two goats, the word that we used there was the same one, seirim. Seirim means goats. But that's not what it means here. None of the commentaries say that this means goats here. According to Rashi, and it seems like everyone agrees with him on this, the seirim are shadim. Now here's where I had a little bit of a dilemma. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I usually translate shade as gremlin. Most people translate it as demon, but I feel like gremlin is a better translation. First of all, because I feel like demon has a lot of theological connotations that are associated with ideas from other religions, so I feel like using the word demon could get confusing and misleading. But also, even if we simplify the concept of demons and disregard the other theological stuff, I still feel like the word implies pure evil and some level of godlike power, which to me doesn't fit with the way shadim are described in the Talmud. Sure, the Talmud says very clearly in a lot of places that they're dangerous and offers a lot of different ways of avoiding being harmed by them, but they don't sound like pure evil and they don't sound all that powerful to me. One of the alternate names for these creatures in the Talmud is mazikim, which means destructive ones or troublemakers. Basically, to me, they sound like non-corporeal dudes or semi-corporeal dudes who cause problems, but who can also be reasoned with and who can even be helpful sometimes. So I like using the word gremlins instead. But when I read this verse, it didn't sound like gremlins to me. It felt a lot more evil and powerful than gremlins. It felt like maybe it was scary goat demons. So I wasn't sure if I should translate it as goat gremlins or goat demons. Maybe the way the word is used in Tanakh and the written Torah is different than the way that it's used by Chazal in the Talmud and in Midrash. And to make matters even creepier, when Rashi tells us that seirim means shadim, he points us to a verse in Yeshayahu or Isaiah, which details a prophecy about the downfall of Babylon. And when it's describing how desolate it'll be, it says, "And martens shall dwell there, and their houses shall be filled with ferrets, and ostriches shall dwell there, and seirim shall dance there." And in this verse too, pretty much all the commentaries agree that the seirim are shadim. So now the scary goat demons are dancing, which is super creepy to me. Okay, so another question. Why are they called goats? Ibn Ezra explains it in his commentary on this verse without any mention of the riddle in his commentary on the earlier verse. He says that they're shadim, which for now we'll translate as demons, but that they appear as goats to insane people.
Oh, great. I'm tuned into little kids, I'm tuned into dogs, and now I'm tuned into the mentally absent.
Which makes it even scarier. Also, I'm not sure what it means. There are two ways I could read this. One way is that they don't exist, and that they're a particular type of delusion where people see goat demons. The other way is that the goat demons do exist, but they can only be perceived by insane people. Radak gives a similar explanation, but a little bit different. He says that they're called goats because they appear as goats to those who believe in them, which is also creepy. And again, I have a couple of different ways I could read that. Either they don't exist, but the people who believe in them imagine them as goat-like, or they do exist, but you can only see them if you believe in them. So we've got Ibn Ezra saying that they look like goats to insane people, and Radak saying that they look like goats to the true goat demon believers. And I thought, maybe I could smush these together in one of two ways. One way is that they don't exist and anybody who believes in them is insane. Or they do exist, but they can only be seen by people who are delusional enough to believe in them, which I think is a lovely idea. The Netziv offers a different approach to why these things are referred to as goats. He says it's because they're restless and they jump around like goats, which I think makes them even scarier because now they're not just creepy dancing goat demons, now they're wild and unpredictable and jumping around. Okay, so now we have a few different explanations of the goat thing. But while I was digging around for stuff about these goat demons, one of the things that I saw in a few different commentaries was that they went into details about shadim in general, how they work, what they eat, all sorts of stuff. There was tons of it, and I can't share it all here. But one thing that I thought was particularly interesting was that Ramban gives us some specific details about the natural habitat of shadim. He says that the word shade comes from the word shadud, which means destroyed or set. So the reason why they're called shadim
they're in
is because
ravaged
they live
places.
in desolate places like the desert. But their main habitat is the extreme outskirts of the earth. For example, the northernmost region of Earth, which is desolate because of how cold it is. So according to Ramban, gremlins or demons or whatever it is we're talking about live in the Arctic Circle. Just an aside, this fun fact about the natural habitat of gremlins made me think about making a nature documentary about gremlins. If that's something you think you'd watch, let me know in the comments. Okay, now it's time to resolve this gremlin demon dilemma. Sforno clarifies what these creatures are and what the Jewish people's relationship with them was. He says that they weren't worshipped as deities at all. So then why were we commanded not to give them offerings anymore? Sounds like we did worship them at one point. And the answer is because the ancient Israelites, before they were freed from Egypt and before they were given the mitzvahs, used to give these goat guys stuff, but not as a sacrifice, but to earn their friendship so that they would help them and do stuff for them. And then as proof for this idea that these creatures can have that type of relationship, he gives examples from Gemara, and he specifically mentions Yosef Sheda, or Joseph the Gremlin, who we've talked about before, who was a gremlin who used to help the rabbis of the Talmud with gremlin-related stuff. So now this is starting to sound less like demons and more like the gremlins that I'm used to. And then he ends off by saying that it's worth considering the way the sages of the Talmud referred to these guys as mazikim, destructive troublemakers with potential to do serious damage, but also mortal beings that eat and drink and reproduce and die. But also they're invisible. So there was kind of an information dump there at the end, a lot of different ideas just kind of piled on. But to me, what I think it was saying is that, yeah, they're kind of contradictory beings, but they're not completely out of this world, godlike evil demons. They're supernatural, yeah, but they're mortal. They're guys, destructive, invisible gremlin guys. So at least according to Sforno, they're just dangerous, invisible gremlin guys who can be helpful if you get on their good side. The problem is if you start offering them gifts of blood. All right, that's it. That's the rabbit hole. As I said, I had a lot more stuff that I wanted to get to, but it's late in the week and I had to get the video done. But if you want to find more stuff, please use the source sheet in the description as a springboard and share what you find in the comments. Thank you for following me down the rabbit hole. I'm not going to tell you how to get out, but I will give you a hint. You'll know in exactly 3, 2, 1.
Shabbat Shalom. In this week's Parshah, Parashat Achrei Mot, we read a fascinating juxtaposition in which the same word is used to describe the nations of the world and the Jewish people. The pasuk says like this: K'maseh Eretz Mitzrayim, the land of Egypt where you have just been living, lo tasu, do not follow in their path. K'maseh Canaan, and the ways of the people of Canaan, asher ani mevei etchem shama, to the place that I'm going to bring you to. Again, lo tasu, don't do it. Uvechokotehem lo telechu, and do not follow in their laws and their statutes. Then in verse 4, chapter 18, et mishpatai tasu, but my commandments you shall do. Vechokotai tishmeru lalechet bahem, you shall walk and safeguard my decrees and my commandments. That you shall do, says Hashem. So the chukim the statutes and the laws of the Canaanites and Egyptians do not do, but you shall do my commandments. And the question is, what's the juxtaposition? Why on earth would I even think about learning and studying about the values and the traditions and the faith of the Egyptians and the ancient Canaanites? And here is a fascinating and very powerful insight. We find very often that when it comes to understanding other people and other belief systems, we are always very respectful and careful not to hurt or not to embarrass or not to insult them. We'll spend time analyzing them, being respectful of how they behaved. People, scholars, have spent time delving into ancient Egypt cultures, ancient Canaanite practices. They'll spend a lot of time analyzing them. But when it comes to our own tradition, our own faith, all of a sudden, there's no respect, no interest whatsoever. There's a famous story told by Mordechai Kamenetsky in his book, Torah Parables, which highlights this. He tells a story of a young yeshiva bocher who's on a plane. He sits down on the plane, and he has a beard, and he has the black hat, and he's wearing the traditional Hasidic or yeshivish robes or garments. A man comes on the plane, sits down, and berates him. Is it ridiculous that you guys are living in the Middle Ages? Get with the times. Be part of the modern world. It's absolutely a disgrace that you behave like this. When will you guys change? And instead of taking a back step, this yeshiva bocher turns to the man and says, I'm sorry, but I'm Amish. And as we know, the Amish dress the same way. Also, white shirts, black pants, hat, beard. To which the man responds, oh, I'm so sorry. I never meant to insult you. I think what you're doing is amazing, that you're keeping the values of your past alive, that you're inspiring your children, that the values of this world are so corrupt that you're keeping to your position. I think that's just amazing. To which the yeshiva bocher turns to him and smiles and says, so if I'm non-Jewish, you respect me. But when doing the same thing as a Jew, you don't respect me? That, in essence, my friends, is what the Parsha is talking about. 𤊌𤐤𤓐, when it comes to the ways of the ancient peoples, don't give them you're giving them the respect. But of our own tradition, you're not interested. Not way around. Respect our tradition, respect our values, learn from them. And if you can't, at least give us the same respect as you would when you're studying about the ancient cultures. At least that way. Spend a bit of time. Spend a bit of time trying to understand what it is that Jewish culture, Jewish tradition, Jewish faith, Jewish practice is all about. We get excited when we come to the table and say, do you know what the ancient Egyptians used to do? What about coming to the Shabbos table and saying, do you know what our ancestors used to do? Or have you heard about this Jewish tradition or this Jewish practice? Surely, we can work, we can walk in the statutes that God has given us and study them with at least the same respect, reverence, and due care and diligence as we do when we're studying ancient Greeks, ancient Egyptians. They aren't here anymore, but we are. It behoves us to learn a bit about our own culture and our own traditions and our own faith. Shabbat Shalom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer. I'm podcasting from Malady in Israel. The opening line to the Lord of the Rings movies is something on the order of, the world is changing. There is no denying the truth of that line. While it applied to a fictional world, it certainly applies equally well to our own. Things are changing so fast that it is impossible to keep up with them, even if one spends their entire life trying to keep up with them. It's just too much to handle, with technology and social media and new standards of morality, to say nothing of by-the-minute changes in traditions and culture. It is nothing short of a whirlwind. It is that last category, the rapid changes in culture and traditions, that many people find themselves at a loss. They don't know what to do when some age-old custom goes out the window. They want to keep doing it, but realize that this puts them in a position of seeming out of things and highly antiquated. Everybody suffers from this to one degree or another, but some really get hit hard by it. A great example of this is religious customs. While these are still quite popular in many circles, those circles tend to be religious. It is not easy to avoid feeling like some kind of loser when explaining to somebody else the weird things that have to be done to keep some religious tradition going. Examples of this include anything from praying at specific times, or even praying at all, eating ceremonial meals, fasting, doing some strange act like bowing or genuflecting, or even going through a traditional marriage ceremony. These sorts of things have to be explained, justified, rationalized, and joked about if they are to gain any modicum of acceptance in a supposedly tolerant world. Judaism, of course, is no exception to any of this. Jews have to put up with all kinds of food laws restricting what they can eat in almost infinite variety of settings. They have to manage all those holidays and Shabbat hassles to fit in with their busy and interfering schedules. They have all kinds of obstacles in social and cultural settings, some that would make anybody uncomfortable to the point of wondering why on earth they are sticking with the program. Traditional Jews have done a fairly good job of keeping these things going under the most trying of circumstances. They are still keeping Passover with its food requirements after 3,000 years of opportunities to just chuck the whole thing. They still keep the Shabbat and the major holidays, to say nothing of daily prayers and all kinds of family and community obligations. A lot has changed since biblical times. Of that, there is no doubt. A lot has changed over the past few hundred years, or even the past century. But on the whole, traditional Jews don't seem to be anywhere near some existential precipice where they just fall off into the void of secular conformity. But there is no question that certain things have fallen off the Jewish radar. We are no longer doing animal sacrifices. We are no longer into any kind of rules on ritual purity and impurity. We have dropped all kinds of laws relating to agriculture and making or breaking of vows. Nobody is pushing to bring back regulations on marrying a victim of rape or of mistresses. The fact is that it's a good bet that well over half the explicit laws written in the Torah have effectively been abandoned in one form or another. Even many monetary laws have been dropped, or else loopholes have been created to work around them. The reasons for all these changes vary, but the common theme is that the laws fell out of practicality or relevance and were only retained as a memory of what things were like in biblical times. There's a pretty good example of this in this week's Parsha. In fact, there are several examples of this, but we shall focus on one particular thing. The Parsha is called Achrei Mot, which means after the death. That somewhat morbid phrase is an introduction to a series of rituals that were to be instructed to Moshe's brother Aaron, the high priest. Aaron's two sons had died in a mysterious ritual about 2 parshas ago. This parsha was a follow-up to that incident. The specific rituals deal with the circumstances in which Aaron was to enter the inner chamber of the tabernacle. Even though he was the high priest, he wasn't allowed to enter anytime he wished. It was only with very detailed rituals that he was permitted, since the Ark of the Covenant, which was housed in this inner chamber, was encompassed by the cloud-like presence of God. To enter under improper conditions would result in his death. There are a few animal offerings that he has to bring, in addition to a couple of different sets of clothing. He also has to immerse himself a few times in the entire process of going in and out of the chamber. Among the more bizarre procedures in this elaborate process is the taking of lots to decide which of 2 goats are to be sacrificed on the altar and which was to be sent off to some out-of-the-way location. Among the more important elements of this process is the burning of the incense in the inner chamber so that the smoke from the incense envelops the cover of the ark. Following this are some ritual sprinklings of blood from one of the offerings as a means of purification of both the tabernacle and of the populace. Atonement in general is the primary function of this entire ritual, with the word getting mentioned many times in the 30 or so verses that comprise this section. All in all, it takes up about a third of the Parsha. At the very end of the section, we are told that this procedure was to be done on the 10th day of the 7th month of the year, which was to be a fast during which no work was to be done. This was to be an eternal law for the Israelites, serving as an annual atonement for their sins. This day, of course, came to be known as Yom Kippur, which was to be a fast during which no work was to be done. Day of the 7th month of the year, which was to be a fast during which no work was to be done. This was to be an eternal law for the Israelites, serving as an annual atonement for their sins. This day, of course, came to be known as Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, widely considered to be the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. This is the reason why this section is read on Yom Kippur. While a good deal of this is a bit strange to our modern standards, there is one part that just takes the cake. This is not the incense or the other offerings, nor is it the special clothing or the bathing or even the Ark of the Covenant. It involves that business with the goats. One was to be offered on the altar, a pretty normal procedure by biblical standards. The other was to be taken out to that out-of-the-way location for some unclear action to be done with it. It is all left rather vague in the Torah. The lottery is done with markers placed on the 2 goats, one marked for God and the other marked for Azazel. This word, it turns out, comes up no less than 4 times in this section of the Parsha. Its meaning has always been uncertain. It only appears here in all of the Bible, and there has never been an altogether clear translation or explanation of it. In modern Hebrew, it has come to mean the equivalent of hell. It appears twice in the key verse that may clarify what this mysterious word may mean. Quote, "And the goat that has upon it the lot for Azazel shall remain alive before God, to atone upon it, to send it to Azazel in the wilderness." That is really all we have to go on with this strange word. There was one other verse later on that clarifies a little the exact procedure of sending the goat into the wilderness. Quote, "Aaron shall press both of his hands on the head of the live goat and confess upon it all the sins of the Israelites and all of their rebellious acts and all of their inadvertent misdeeds. And he shall place them on the head of the goat and send it in the hands of an appointed person to the wilderness. So it seems that it was a particular form of atonement that worked through some kind of general confession said by the high priest on behalf of all the Israelites. Somehow that confession and the high priest laying his hands on the goat's head served as a vicarious atonement for everyone. It is generally understood that the goat in some way carried off the sins to the wilderness, where it was tossed off some cliff and died. This goat, for better or worse, has come to be known through an ancient Greek translation of the Torah as the, quote, scapegoat. In fact, that is how this translation translates the key word Azazel. While this is a bit of a stretch as far as the exact translation, it definitely seems to zero in on what this goat was all about. The goat carried all the collective sins out into the wilderness where they were left, presumably to be forgotten. It was a very ingenious and very biblical way of getting rid of the impossible burden of sin. What are we to make of all this? There's no question that Judaism has long abandoned this procedure, and we really have nothing resembling it in contemporary times. This went out with the destruction of the temple about 2,000 years ago, and possibly centuries before that. It was just too strange for the rational and mystical formulations of Judaism that took place over the last 2,000 years. But it was there at one time, and we still read about it when we cite this Parsha on Yom Kippur. Nobody is trying to hide anything unsavory, even if we no longer actively attempt to duplicate this in any way. But what did it mean back then? It certainly seems to have been a means of vicarious atonement. This goat, which was a kind of sacrifice, even though it differed from normal offerings in that it wasn't offered on the altar, was believed to be able to carry away the sins and thus achieve atonement in some way. Nobody in the rabbinic world for the past 1,000 years really pretends to understand this process in anything that resembles a rational manner. The best they can offer is some sort of bribe or payment to the force of evil known as the Satan. While this may have worked at one time, it is certainly hard to try to push it in modern times to modern ears. Perhaps the only alternative is to take it exactly as it says. It was an atonement in that it did carry away those sins. That this is strange to modern sentiments may be more reflection on us than on the procedure. Sin back then was a tremendous burden, both spiritually and emotionally. It had to be dealt with. To leave it be was to carry a guilt that simply couldn't be borne. This was the biblical way of finally ridding oneself of that burden. It was to be done once a year to serve as a once-a-year atonement. Perhaps we can no longer see the rationale behind all this because we no longer see sin as such a great burden. It is just the way things are, and we go our merry way and walk away from it. This tradition and this custom are largely out of our lives. Is that a good thing? Most people would say yes, since it is clearly antiquated and archaic. Nobody wants to be throwing goats off cliffs in the wilderness to relieve us of our sin. But what else do we have? Perhaps in abandoning rituals such as this, we have subjected ourselves to untold burdens that we may not recognize and may not be able to adequately handle. Sometimes we do not truly understand what we are abandoning when we toss off some antiquated tradition. We may be throwing away a precious jewel in our efforts to clean our house of the past. Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah, personally, I just don't think that we need to be throwing goats off of cliffs, but that's just me. Oh, I want to hear what they're saying recently.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is 𝐤𝐇𝐓 Meyer, and I'm podcasting from malady in Israel. We are all familiar with the concept of superstition. It is generally used as a derogatory term to refer to any practice or belief that has no logical or rational basis. Thus, it is superstition to not walk under a ladder for fear of some danger, or to believe that wearing a rabbit's foot brings good luck. Most religious practices would be labeled superstition by this standard. They rarely are backed by any rational logic and are only accepted by virtue of religious authority or tradition. Of course, it is frequently difficult to know where to draw the line on this standard. Is the effectiveness of a placebo based on superstition? What about the feeling of dread upon entering a certain place or embarking on a certain task? If we insist on an absolutely strict rational basis for everything we do, anything along these lines should be called superstitious. But we all know that the human mind doesn't work this way. We are not computers, no matter how much we try to convince ourselves that we are. Our lives revolve around emotional feelings that have little to no connection to rational thought. Perhaps some AI network could be made to work without any reliance on non-rational leanings, but that only proves that AI is not really human at all. It is in vogue to think that the steady march of humanity towards the modern era has been defined by its willingness to abandon superstition in favor of logic. There is a quite strong basis for believing such an idea. Science in particular has been at the forefront of the battle against superstition. Anything scientific is by definition anti-superstition. It explains the workings of the world as a result of the known laws of nature that follow specific guidelines, and not by the haphazard whims of some feeling or some old belief. But this steady march towards rational progress, as great as it has been, has its casualties. Many people are repulsed by the idea that everything works according to some mechanical system that allows no room for human emotion or mystery. These people want the possibility that things don't always have to run according to some strict scientific plan. They do not wish to see life and all of its intricacies as nothing more than a grand computer program. If this allows others to call them superstitious, then so be it. At least they are still human. It happens that most of the beliefs of the past would be called superstitious today. This is because much of what was believed in the past had no relation to what we now call science. Does this make all of that life in the past nothing more than a long string of incorrect nonsense? Perhaps it does, and the science-minded among us might have no problem saying that everything that happened before our current state of enlightenment was nothing more than hopeless stabs in the dark. But who knows what future generations will think of the current state of knowledge? They might regard us as just as hopelessly lost as we regard those who lived before us. Perhaps it's best if we learn to recognize that human beliefs and human knowledge are always in a state of flux, and one person's superstition is another person's faith and inspiration. It happens that the Bible is a classic example of an ancient collection of beliefs that many today would have no problem labeling superstitious. There are all kinds of animal sacrifices for every imaginable occasion, none of which make any sense today. There is a talking snake and a talking donkey, to say nothing of a bush that burns and is not consumed. God speaks regularly to people, and they either listen or ignore what God has to say. All of this is steeped with antiquated notions of how things work and what forces there are that make things happen. The very notion of God is frequently deemed nothing more than superstition by much of the enlightened world. But again, by regarding anything we cannot see or measure with some gadget as non-existent, we run the risk of burying our humanity in a heap of logic. Is this really what we want? This week's Parsha is called Achrei Mot. That is a two-word phrase which means after the death. Although it sounds a bit ominous, it is really nothing more than an introduction to a certain ceremony that involved the kohen gadol, or high priest, who was none other than Aaron, the brother of Moshe. A few parshas ago, 2 of his sons were tragically burned to death by some sort of heavenly fire for bringing an uncalled for incense offering in the course of the dedication ceremonies of the Mishkan. This divine fire consumed them completely and left their father Aaron in a state of silence, torn between his emotions over the death of his sons and his pivotal role in the ceremonies taking place. The opening verse of this parsha recalls that event in introducing this other ceremony in which Aaron would also be the central participant. This particular ceremony is one of the most elaborately described in the Torah. It describes in great detail by Torah standards the various offerings and procedures to be done on Yom Kippur in biblical times. There are a few animal sacrifices and a very unique incense offering that involve the rare event of the high priest entering the inner sanctum of the Mishkan, the chamber which housed the Ark of the Covenant and nothing else. This ceremony takes up an entire chapter in the Torah. It seems to have little to do with Yom Kippur as we know it today. One of the more unique features of this ceremony is a procedure involving 2 goats. Lots were drawn, and one of the goats was selected to be an offering to Hashem, brought in the course of the day. The fate of the other was quite strange by any definition of the term. It was to be sent out into the wilderness, carrying the sins of the Israelites. This goat became known as the classic scapegoat, the thing that was chosen to bear the blame for the fault of others. Jewish tradition has it that this goat was led to a certain cliff in the vicinity of Jerusalem and cast off of it. It would break apart in the course of its fall, thus symbolizing the collective desire for all of the sins of the community to be eradicated. This goat has come to be identified as the classic biblical example of superstition. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for how it works. Can a goat really carry the sins of the Israelites off into the wilderness? How was anybody expected to believe that such a thing could actually take place in some real sense? But there it is. There is no question that the modern opinion of this, scientific or otherwise, would reject it out of hand as pure nonsense. But it was a highly significant biblical ceremony performed once a year and under the holiest of conditions. That we cannot relate to such a ceremony and consider it superstition is a reflection of vastly different times and beliefs. The Parsha has more of this. There is a prohibition against eating blood. While many are still disgusted by this, there are many who would deem this another antiquated example of superstition. Then there is the long list of prohibited incestuous relations. Although most of these are still considered repugnant and forbidden for quite rational reasons, there are some that are not. Among them are the prohibitions against sex with a menstruating woman and male homosexuality. Both of these are no longer universally considered taboo, and thus any belief prohibiting them is automatically placed in the dreaded category of superstition. But at the end of the Parsha, we find the general warning that seems to openly declare a superstitious slant. After the list of incestuous prohibitions is finished, we read, quote, "Do not let yourselves be defiled by any of these acts. It was as a result of them that the nations that I am driving away from before you became defiled. The land became defiled, and when I intervened against its sin, the land vomited out its inhabitants. And then a little later, you shall not induce the land to vomit you out by defiling it, as it vomited out the nation that was before you." This business about the land vomiting out its inhabitants is also found in next week's Parsha, following the repetition of the prohibitions against incense. This odd expression is really a particularly graphic way of describing exile from the land. This, of course, implies that the land in some way cares about the sexual morality of its inhabitants. How are we to understand this? Are we expected to believe that the land has some sense of awareness as to what those who are living upon it are doing? This seems impossible even by the somewhat non-rational standards one might expect from the Bible. First off, we have to clarify that this is not understood as the land itself having some sort of volition to expel its inhabitants that it doesn't want. That would be an example of the classic idolatrous beliefs that are prohibited all over the Torah. The land is not a deity in any way, shape, or form. It was not worshipped in any manner by the Israelites. The universally understood explanation of this is that it was God who caused the land to vomit out its inhabitants if they committed these sins. While that might not take things out of the modern standard for superstition, it at least gets rid of any suspicion of idolatry regarding the land. But it's still pretty strange. Don't things like national exile happen because of wars or droughts or plagues? Those are perfectly rational explanations for this extreme situation that require no evoking of divine will or any form of the supernatural. Surely these sorts of things were known and very obvious in biblical times. The Bible mentions national exile several times, the most famous of which was that of the Israelites themselves. It came as a result of being conquered by an enemy nation. When described, there is no mention of the land vomiting out its inhabitants. So why is this imagery used here? The answer is that this was the Torah's way of describing such a thing. We may prefer to think of national exile as a very normal happening in the course of the events in the world. We may not wish to attribute any divine influence to such situations. We may think of it as simply a result of war or the whims of the weather or whatever. But we really don't know if there was not some supernatural will pulling the strings behind the scenes that set up that war or that drought. What makes droughts happen? What makes wars happen? There may be human influences and there may be atmospheric influences, but there also may be influences that do not work strictly along natural or what we might call rational means. Is attributing such a phenomenon to God really superstition? Or is it simply looking for a deeper reason to explain why things happen? We could even ask, who really is being superstitious? The one who evokes God to explain such things, or the one who refuses to consider anything divine in the picture? Shabbat Shalom.
אתם יודעים, אני לוי. לוי. יש פה לוויים. מה השם? מנחם רוזנטל. מנחם רוזנטל. ינאי גורליק. ינאי גורלי ו... נבו לוי. נבו לוי. לוי. אתם כולכם לוויים. כן. כולכם לוויים. בואו, נפנים לכם מקום, יאללה. קדימה. אתה, אני מבין, ברקן לא לוי. איפה? קדימה, בוא שב. חבר הכנסת לשעבר עושה לך כבוד, קודם מבין מה זה לוויים. קח מיקרופון בבקשה, מיקרופון. הגעתם, אני מבין, לחדש את שירת הלוויים, נכון?
אכן, זה חלום שאנחנו הרבה שנים חולמים על בית המקדש, אבל קצת את הפרטים של מה עושים בו בפנים.
השיר שהלוויים היו שרים בבית המקדש.
אומרים את זה גם כל יום, ופעם לא חשבנו להוציא את זה לפסים מעשיים, עד שהרב מנחם יזם את המפעל הגדול הזה.
תספר לנו, הרב, מה מדובר, מה הרעיון, איפה זה קרה היום?
היום זה לא התחיל היום, התחלנו לפני שנה וחצי. הרעיון הוא באמת לעשות פעולות מעשיות, שניתנות לבצע מבחינה הלכתית, להתקרב כמה שיותר ולקרב את הלבבות כמה שיותר לכיסופים, ולראות שדברים יכולים להיעשות בפועל, את הלבבות כמה שיותר לכיסופים, ולראות שדברים יכולים להיעשות בפועל, ולהתכונן. גם אם לא עולים להר הבית, אבל אפשר להתכונן ולעלות להר הבית. בין השאר, הלוויים שילמדו איך לשיר. ברגע שידעו איך לשיר, ייבנה הבית.
אז אפשר לומר, אחרי שעשו את נטילת הידיים לכהנים, הלוויים, לברכת הכהנים, אחר כך ניגשים לשירה.
אתה לא יודעת כמה אתה מדייק, הזוהר הקדוש כותב שלא בכדי הלוויים נוטלים את ידיהם לכהנים. זאת אומרת שהכהנים בבית המקדש הם ממונים על העבודה. הם לא מדברים, חוץ ממברכים את הברכות. והלוויים הם שרים. בצירוף השירה אל העבודה היא זו שבעצם מרוממת את הקורבן לריח ניחוח אישי להשם. ולכן הלוויים נוטלים דווקא את ידי הכהנים שהולכים לעשות את העבודה.
מה עשיתם בפועל שם היום?
אז היום בעצם עמדנו ביחד ושרנו אחרי שאנחנו מכינים את עצמנו כבר שנה וחצי, פחות או יותר.
בחזרות ובעיבודים. יש מנצח יקר מאוד בשם 𝐀𐤇𝐓𝐷 שהכין לנו עיבודים, ואנחנו בעצם עמדנו ושרנו כמה שירים, גם את ההלל, את המזמורים של ההלל, גם את השיר היקר אחינו כל בית ישראל.
כשאתם שרים את זה, את המזמורים מההלל, במנגינה סטנדרטית או במשהו שאולי ייחד אותנו פעם?
אפשר להגיד שבחרנו מנגינות מכלל העדות.
שיתאים לכל עם ישראל.
בדיוק, כדי שיהיה, זה בסוף דיוק, כל עדה, כנראה סחבה איתה משהו בגלות הארוכה מבית המקדש, מהשירה המקורית, והנחנו שאם המנגינה היא פשוטה בכל עם ישראל והרבה מכירים אותה, אז אולי יש בה איזה נגיעה שורשית לשירה המקורית.
אני רק מנסה להבין, כי אני לוי ואני אמור לשיר, אבל הקול שלי זה לא...
לא, שרת יפה אתמול באישם.
לא, זה ביחד עם כולם, אתה יודע, זה כמו שירה של ליל סדר, זה לא פה.
יש גם תפקיד של שוערים.
הלוויים אחראים על 3 שינים, שערים, שמירה ושירה. אז אם לא יהיה לך עם השירה, נעשה לך אודישן.
במקרה שלי יש רביעי גם שקט. רק שאני אהיה שקט.
בתור אוהד של מכבי חיפה, אתה להיות שוער.
עזוב מכבי כדורגל. אני רוצה, אתה יודע, אני פה מפתיע. אני רוצה לשאול אתכם על הביגוד, מה... מבוסס על משהו?
כן, אנחנו, כל הפעולה הגדולה הזאת של כינון ומחודש של שירת הלוויים, הוא יוזמה של מכון המקדש, בראשותו של רב ישראל אריאל, ויש שם מכון מחקר, שהוא מכון מחקר הלכתי היסטורי. ונעשו פעולות מחקר ענפות מאוד, הן ברמה ההלכתית, הן ברמה ההיסטורית. נכתבה עבודה ארוכה מאוד בנושא של בידי הלוויים, שירת הלוויים, יש ספר שעומד לצאת עכשיו, כ-350 עמוד, ובעבודה הגדולה שנעשתה, הגענו למסקנה, לפי העדויות היסטוריות והלכתיות, שהבגדים האלה שאנחנו לובשים אותם הם מאוד קרובים למה שהיה אז.
זאת אומרת, אני צריך להבין שאני צריך סט
יש תיאור במתתיהו, יש תיאורים בתנ"ך על בגדי הלוויים. מוסרים את כל זה ביחד.
מה נבחר לשיר מההלל? עוד השם כי טוב, אותך השם למה?
את כל השירים ששרים בחול המועד פסח.
אני שואל מה נבחר, כי אני רוצה לשמוע שירה עכשיו, אז אם כבר אז כבר עשיתם מחנות 1.5 שנה.
אני חושב שבימים האלה, שבהם הרגשות מאוד מעורבים, השמחה והכיסופים לפדות של אחינו שנמצאים בצער בשביה, אני חושב שאחינו כל בית ישראל זו תפילה ראויה לימים האלה.
כן, שזה מתחבר מאוד למי שזוכר, זה אחד משני השירים ששרו בתקופת הגירוש.
כן.
אחינו כל בית ישראל ותפילה לעני.
זה מעניין.
בהחלט.
זה באותו שטח טריטוריאלי.
כן, בדיוק, זה מה שאני אומר, זה כל כך מתחברים הדברים. קדימה.
אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשבייה, העולים בין בים ובין ביבשה. אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשבייה, העולים בין בים ובין ביבשה. המקום יעזר, ואתם ויציאם מצרים, לברכה ומיפה מאורה, ומשעבוד לגאולה, בגלה ובזמן קריב. המקום יעזר, ירחם עליהם ויוציא מצרים. ומאפן לאורה, ומשעבוד לגאולה, בגלה ובזמן קריב.
תתקיים בעזרת השם הסיפה, שתה בעגלה ובזמן קריב, בזמן קרוב. ישובו כולם הביתה. יישר כוח לכם, כי זה לא קונבנציונלי, זה לא משהו רגיל, שאנשים מוסרים עצמם, בשביל עם ישראל, הוא לא עושה את זה בשבילו, הם לא עושים את זה בשביל עצמם, ובאים לחדש ולהראות.
ככל שנשתוקק יותר ונעשה יותר, זה יקרה יותר מהר.
וצריך לזכור עוד דבר, ודיברנו על זה קצת ככה, אם נסתכל על העבר שלנו, מי חלם שנוכל לעשות דברים כאלה כאן בירושלים הבירה? צריך להסתכל על הכל.
עוד משורר בבית המקדש.
אנחנו גם מזמינים תמיד, אנחנו מזמינים את כל הלוויים מעם ישראל, שרוצים גם להצטרף לשורות שלנו, זה פתוח. ברגע שתצטבר קבוצה של 30 אנשים בכל מקום בארץ, כל נקודה נפתח קבוצה וילמדו ויעוצו.
הודו להשם כי טוב, כי לעולם חסד. תודה רבה, שיהיו בשורות טובות.
חג שמח.
אתה לא מבין, הגיל שר, הכל עם ישראל. הלוויים זה טבוע.
כולם ברורים, כולם קדושים.
אתה ישלב.
וידבר אדוני וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר וידבר אדוני אל משה אחרי מות שני בני אהרון בקרבתם לפני אדוני וימותו ויאמר אדוני אל משה דבר אל אהרון אחיך ואל יבוא בכל עת אל הקודש מבית לפרוכת אל פני הכפורת אשר על הארון ולא ימות כי בענן אראה על הכפורת בזאת יבוא אהרון אל הקודש בפר בן בקר לחטאת ואיל לעולה כצאן בד קודש ילבש ומכנס בד יהיו על בשרו ובאבנית בד יחגור ובמסנפת בד יסנוף בגדי קודש הם ורחס במים את בשרו ולבשם ומאס עדת בני ישראל ייקח שני שעירי עזים לחטאת ואיל אחד לעולה והקריב אהרון את פר החטאת אשר לו וכיפר בעדו ובעד ביתו ולקח את שני השעירים והעמיד אותם לפני אדוני פתח אוהל מועד ונתן אהרון על שני השעירים גורלות גורל אחד לאדוני וגורל אחד לעזאזל והטריד אהרון את השעיר אשר עליו הגורל לאדוני ועשاه חטאת והשעיר אשר עליו הגורל לעזאזל יעמוד חי לפני אדוני לכפר עליו לשלח אותו לעזאזל המדבר והקריב אהרון את פר החטאת אשר לו וכיפר בעדו ובעד ביתו ושחט את פר החטאת אשר לו ולקח מלוא המחתה גחל אש מעל המזבח מלפני אדוני ומלוא חופניו קטורת סמים דקה והביא מבית לפרוכת ונתן את הקטורת על האש לפני אדוני וכיסה ענן הקטורת את הכפורת אשר על העדות ולא ימות ולקח מדם הפת והיזה באצבעו על פני הכפורת קדמה ולפני הכפורת יזה 7 פעמים מן הדם באצבעו ושחט את שעיר החטאת אשר לעם, והביא את דמו אל מבית לפרוכת, ועשה את דמו כאשר עשה לדם הפר, והיזה אותו על הכפורת ולפני הכפורת, וכיפר על הקודש מתקומות בני ישראל ומפשעיהם לכל חטאותם, וכן יעשה לאוהל מועד השוכן איתם בתוך טומאותם, וכל אדם לא יהיה באוהל מועד בבואו לכפר בקודש על צאתו, וכיפר בעדו ובעד ביתו ובעד כל קהל ישראל. ויצא אל המזבח אשר לפני אדוני וכיפר עליו, ולקח מדם הפר ומדם השעיר, ונתן על קרנות המזבח סביב, והיזה עליו מן הדם באצבעו 7 פעמים, וטהרו וקדשו מטומאות בני ישראל. וכילה מכפר את הקודש ואת אוהל מועד ואת המזבח, ונקריב את השעיר החי, ושמח אהרון את שתי ידיו, והקריב את השעיר החי, ושמח אהרון את שתי ידיו על ראש השעיר החי, והתוודה עליו את כל עוונות בני ישראל ואת כל פשעיהם לכל חטאותם, ונתן אותם על ראש השעיר, ושילח ביד איש עתי המדבר, ונשא השעיר עליו את כל עוונותם אל ארץ גזרן, ושילח את השעיר במדבר. ובא אהרון אל אוהל מועד, ופשט את בגדי הבד אשר לבש בבואו אל הקודש, והניחם שם, ורעס את בשרו במים במקום קדוש, ולבש את בגדיו, ויצא ועשה את עולתו ואת עולת העם, וכיפר בעדו ובעד העם. ואת חלב החטאת יקטיר המזבח, והמשלח את השעיר לעזאזל יכבס בגדיו, ורעס את בשרו במים, ואחרי כן יבוא אל המחנה, ואת בר החטאת ואת שעיר החטאת אשר מובא את דמם לכפר בקודש, יוציא אל מחוץ למחנה, ושרפו באש את עורותם ואת בשרם ואת פרשם, והשורף אותם יכבס בגדיו, ורעס את בשרו במים, ואחרי כן יבוא אל המחנה. והייתה לכם לחוקת עולם בחודש השביעי בעשור לחודש, תענו את נפשותיכם וכל מלאכה לא תעשו, האזרח והגר הגר בתוככם, כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם לפני אדוני תטהרו. שבת שבתון היא לכם, ועניתם את נפשותיכם חוקת עולם. וכיפר הכהן אשר ימשח אותו ואשר ימלא את ידו לכהן תחת אביו, ולבש את בגדי הבת בגדי הקודש, וכיפר את מקדש הקודש ואת אוהל מועד ואת המזבח יכפר, ועל הכהנים ועל כל עם הקהל יכפר. והייתה זאת לכם לחוקת حقات עולם לכפר על בני ישראל מכל חטאותם אחת בשנה ויעש כאשר ציווה אדוני את משה וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל אהרון ואל בניו ואל כל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם זה הדבר אשר ציווה אדוני לאמור איש איש מבית ישראל אשר ישחט שור או חסד או עז במחנה או אשר ישחט מחוץ למחנה ואל פתח אוהל מועד לא הביאו להקריב קורבן לאדוני לפני משכן אדוני דם יחשב לאיש ההוא דם שפך ונכרת האיש ההוא מקרב עמו למען אשר יביאו בני ישראל את זבחיהם אשר הם זובחים על פני השדה והביאום לאדוני אל פתח אוהל מועד אל הכהן וזבחו זבחי שלמים לאדוני אותם וזרק הכהן את הדם על מזבח אדוני פתח אוהל מועד והקטיר החלב לריח ניחוח לאדוני ולא יזבחו עוד את זבחיהם לשעירים אשר הם זונים אחריהם חוקת עולם תהיה זאת להם לדורותם ועליהם תאמר איש איש מבית ישראל ומן הגר אשר יגור בתוכם אשר יעלה עולה או זבח ואל פתח אוהל מועד לא יביאנו לעשות אותו לאדוני ונכרת האיש ההוא מעמיו ואיש מבית ישראל ומן הגר הגר בתוכם אשר יאכל כל דם ונתתי פניי בנפש האוכלת את הדם והכרתי אותה מקרב עמה כי נפש הבשר בדם היא ואני נתתים לכם על המזבח לכפר על נפשותיכם כי הדם הוא בנפש יכפר על כן אמרתי לבני ישראל כל נפש מכם לא תאכל דם והגר הגר בתוככם לא יאכל דם מפני ישראל ומן הגר הגר בתוכם אשר יסוף צד חיה או עוף אשר יאכל ושפך את דמו וכיסהו בעפר כי נפש כל בשר דמו ונפשו הוא ואומר לבני ישראל דם כל בשר לא תאכלו כי נפש כל בשר דמו היא כל אוכליו יקרב וכל נפש אשר תאכל נבלה וטרפה באזרח ובגר וכיבס בגדיו ורחץ במים וטמא עד הערב וטהר ואם לא יכבס ובשרו לא ירעס ונשא עוונו וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם אני אדוני אלוהיכם כמעשה ארץ מצרים אשר ישבתם בה לא תעשו וכמעשה ארץ כנען אשר אני מביא אתכם שם לא תעשו וחוקותיהם לא תלכו את משפטי תעשו ואת חוקותי תשמרו ללכת בהם אני אדוני אלוהיכם ושמרתם את חוקותי ואת משפטי אשר יעשה אותם האדם וחי בהם אני אדוני איש איש אל כל שאר בשרו לא תקרבו לגלות ערווה אני אדוני ערוות אביך וערוות אמך לא תגלה אמך היא לא תגלה ערוותה ערוות אשת אביך לא תגלה ערוות אביך היא ערוות אחותך בת אביך או בת אמך מולדת בית או מולדת חוס לא תגלה ערוותה ערוות בת בנך או בת ביתך לא תגלה ערוותן כי ערוותך הן ערוות בת אשת אביך מולדת אביך אחותך היא לא תגלה ערוותה ערוות אחות אביך לא תגלה שאר אביך היא ערוות אחות אמך לא תגלה כי שאר אמך היא ערוות אחי אביך לא תגלה אל אשתו לא תקרב דודתך היא ערוות כלתך לא תגלה אשת בנך היא לא תגלה ערותה ערוות אשת אחיך לא תגלה ערוות אחיך היא ערוות אישה וביתה לא תגלה את בת בנה ואת בת ביתה לא תקח לגלות ערוותה שערהן זמה היא ואישה אל אחותה לא תקח לשרור לגלות ערוותה עליה בחייה ואל אישה וניתת טומאתה לא תקרב לגלות ערוותה ואל אשת עמיתך לא תיתן שכבתך לזרע לטומאתה ומזרעך לא תיתן.
That doesn't make sense. This is, or the daughter of her daughter, or the daughter of her daughter, you shall not marry to uncover her nakedness. Close relatives are they. It is a depraved plot. A woman in addition to her sister you shall not marry to make them rival. A woman in addition to her sister you may not marry to make them rivals. Is it saying you may not marry them because they'll become rivals, or is it saying you may not marry them to make them rivals, to uncover like with that intention? I mean, I think you could argue either because one leads to the other, but also you can't do it for specifically for that reason. To make them rivals, to uncover the nakedness of one upon the other in her lifetime, to a woman in her time of... So it's saying you can marry a woman's sister, it can't be while one's alive. Interesting. So I wonder if that's the reason why Rachel ends up dying, to make it okay that he would, like basically, I don't know, because maybe it's almost like sleeping with one while the other was alive Maybe he caused it by having married both. Maybe it was a stress that did Rachel in. That's a sad thought. Rachel's deserve to live long lives. I mean, I guess there's some not so good Rachels, but like I'd say in general, like people. Actually, you know what? People deserve to live long lives because at the end of the day, if you think about it, whether someone lives a good life or a bad life, regardless of what they deserve to, deal with it for the rest of their life, which should be long. Because whether you did good things or bad things, you should be able to experience those. I mean, I guess like, if someone's suffering, then you don't want to live as long. But in general, I think that it's a good idea to prolong the life of everybody. At the end of the day, if it's actually about making people pay, well, then again, I guess it's also some people aren't introspective at all. So some people never think about the bad shit they do. But if you're a relatively healthy person, I'd say that that if you do bad, you reflect on it. And so, given more time, we can do more good. And also, if you did bad, you have to deal with that for longer, as opposed to just getting to, eventually, because we all eventually float away into nothingness. And whether that nothingness is also something is, another question entirely. But the point, though, is that I think that, at least on this earth, that if you want someone to pay the most for the evil that they've done, you should make them live with that, even if that's just sitting with it. Sometimes sitting, especially in silence or by yourself, can be the most painful thing. It doesn't even have to be like in solitary confinement. It could just be because you just are. And I think, like, for me, I get bored. I don't actually have a hard time being with myself for anything but boredom. But there's people who they can't be by themselves because of what they've done. And I think that's definitely something that is underrated in terms of punishment. And also potentially the ability for people to be rehabilitated, if they can be, is by helping them cope through that. But like, it can't just be getting them through it. They have to be able to, like, in the process of trying to get through it, also make amends. And I'd say that, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who they just want to, get off scot-free. They don't actually care about, making peace with what they've done. But I don't know where this is coming from. I've lived one of the most vanilla lives, and I don't know why. Like, I feel like I'm projecting about like 80 years ago, or even what's going on now. I mean, it's horrific. There's so much pain and suffering in human history, and just in the last 100 years alone. But anyway, moving on to happier things. Sedars, or Seirim. Oh, sorry, not happy. We're talking about Malach.
ואת הזכר לא תשכח, משקה ואישה תועבה היא, ובכל בהמה לא תיתן שחובתך לטומאה בה, ואישה ובכל בהמה לא תשכח, ואת הזכר לא תשכח, משקה ואישה.
So it says, and a zachar, or a male, you shall not lie with a woman. But notice, it doesn't say a male with a female, or a man with a woman. It says a male with a woman. This is a topic for another time, and I do want to go into this. I probably will make a video specifically on this, because this is, like, honestly, I feel like, I don't know. I'm probably one of the people I know that spouts this the most, and it's so true, because why is there this formulaic difference? It's because it's not talking about, like, first of all, even if it was talking about, like two men, it wouldn't change the fact that we're dealing with an ancient context where they didn't really have this idea of being gay. It was more so the act, which still, I think we shouldn't live by ancient texts, so much so that we punish people or make people feel bad for being who they are by. But even in that case, I want this to be noted that it's saying you're not to lie with a male as one lies with a woman. And unfortunately, it doesn't say you shall not lie with a female as one lies with a woman. Because, again, I mean, all you have to do is look at, the story of, like, Muhammad. And again, I'm not saying that what he did was okay. By no means is it. But the truth is that many people, not most, but many people in the ancient world did do that because there wasn't this overarching law enforcement that would arrest you for doing something. You know what? Because the truth is, probably some people did see it as messed up. Like, you know, how are you going to, you know, go and, yeah, I'm not getting into the details because I think we all know what this is talking about potentially. But the point is that, like, basically, this text doesn't go far enough. It only protects male children, and that's what I'll say. It should have protected all children, but the truth is that, you know, humans were commodities in the ancient world, and while, you know, males were used for workforce and for militaries, females were used for child rearing and childbearing. And obviously, like, other domestic stuff as well. And also, it should be noted, they did lots of stuff like, lots of arts, as well as, a huge connection to really what we understand as education, as well as the founding of medicine. So much stuff that they don't get credit for. But the point, though, is that they were, unfortunately, you know, treated even more marginally than, well, I don't know where I was going with that, but they were treated extremely marginally, to the point that, you know, male children were protected in a way that female children weren't. They were both seen as commodities, but for different reasons. I'd almost say, like, honestly, I don't know what I was going to say, but it probably wouldn't have been the best. I mean, nothing like intentionally offensive, but just something that might have come across. The point, though, is that while we do live in a more, you know, evolved world, we also still suffer from a lot of the backwards, you know, thinking of the ancients. And at the same time, I mean, like, the truth is that for all we know, it could be something that, I don't know. There's an uncomfortable amount of, I mean, you could just look at, like, whether it's like Elvis Presley or, I'm trying to think, who else? Was it Chaplin? I don't know. Just a lot of people who are, Matt Gaetz, a bunch of people who are, whether they're politicians or entertainers, like, we like to pretend that this is something that our society has put behind it, but it hasn't. It's just come out to the light more. And in some ways, it only had to come out to the light because it was seen as negative. And even that, I mean, from what I understand, that has a lot more to do with the advent of the children's rights movement, which really doesn't go that far back, sadly enough. I mean, also, you just want to look at disabled rights. That does not go far back at all. But the point, though, is that, like, what was it? That, I don't know. I think that we like to look at these texts as very backwards. It's like, oh, you know, how come they're banning this? But if you look at it in context, the banning of, you know, that, again, doesn't go far enough in the case that it only specifies one gender, and it should specify both and clarify that the age is the issue. But, and I mean, a big reason that it probably was included is because in that context, it might have been, like, basically in ritual context, that it was being used for, like, mystery cults. There's a lot of arguments that people have put forward behind why this passage is included. Another big one is Hellenism, because these relations were very common in the Hellenistic world. And so it could have even been that while it was something that was, it is Leviticus, right? No, I don't know where I was going with that. I was thinking of Deuteronomy. No, so I mean, this isn't Leviticus, so this is this was also something that was likely for the Levites. It's possible that it had nothing to do with the general, you know, population of Israel, and it's kind of like basically imagine it this way. If you're working in a nuclear power plant, you're going to have like a different, lifestyle. And see, that's the exact thing. In this context, this is talking about lifestyle. It's not talking about a sexuality. And so I think with that, again, it's like you could argue, well, if you were, well, BC, here's the thing. If you simply look at this within the context of, well, I guess, yeah. Well, because impurity was an issue for Levites, regardless of what type of impurity it was. But I do wonder, because it wasn't, okay, this is actually huge. Because, actually, no, never mind, because it is saying that if they do it. But it could simply be this idea of like, for instance, talking to your friend isn't going to get you killed. But if you're talking to your friend about state secrets and the state isn't particularly nice, it could very well get you killed. Now, in that case, the issue isn't talking. The issue is talking about while you are, see, like in that same way. So it does kind of raise a question. So even if this is talking about two men, it still could be in this context of, well, it's just for Levites, because this was relatively common back then. Anyway, we're going to move on because I need to get to sleep soon.
ובכל בהמה לא תיתן שחובתך לטומאה בה ואישה לא תעמוד לפני בהמה לרבעה הבל הוא אל תטמאו בכל אלה כי בכל אלה נטמאו הגויים אשר אני משלח מפניכם ותטמא הארץ ותפקוד עוונה עליה ותבקיא הארץ את יושביה ושמרתם אתם את חוקותי ואת משפטי ולא תעשו מכל התועבות האלה האזרח והגר הגר בתוככם כי את כל התועבות האלה עשו אנשי הארץ אשר לפניכם ותטמא הארץ ולא תקיא הארץ אתכם וטמאכם אותה כאשר קאה את הגוי אשר לפניכם כי כל אשר יעשה מכל התועבות האלה ונכרתו הנפשות העושות מקרב עמם ושמרתם את משמרתי לבלתי מחוקות התועבות אשר נעשו לפניכם ולא תטמאו בהם אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
As pay. That's actually
אדוני אלוהיכם.
Okay. So, let's see. Where is it? Here. Okay. Here's the immersion. Shoot, where did I put it? Oh, no. Oh, here it is. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו ברוך אדוני נותן התורה. All right. So, on that note, well, I'd say, are there any last thoughts? But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I am the only one here. And my brain is spent, and I need to wake up early because I'm doing a dispo run, and then Hebrew class potentially, and then Shabbos. Oh, also I need to clean up my house because I might be having company over next week. Wink, wink. I'm joking. I'm going to have company over, so I want it to be nice and not look like a pigsty. Which, to be fair, I have my reasons for it being that way. I've had a really rough semester, and it's a self-care thing. But part of the self-care now is cleaning up. So, on that note, this was fun, and by fun, I mean it was all right. I enjoyed it, even though it was just me. Honestly, it was nice being with myself. And then, you know what, you guys got to enjoy as well. So, on that note, Mashiach.
Want to tell the Rebbe the words of the new song that we're singing with Mashiach, right? So I'm just going to read him. Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait. Okay?